Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. The rain was hitting the windshield with such fierceness that Franklin involuntarily flinched at each blow. It was so good that it would break the glass. Not a cheerful picture of natural madness was supplemented by the inner tension that had been accumulating for 3 months. The man desperately wanted to get rid of stress, but he did not know what in this situation would have the greatest effect: a large portion of strong drink or escape to some secluded place. His intuition told him the right thing to do. Franklin, while you're looking for that place, you're gonna lose your mind. That's why it's a good time to get drunk as hell. There's a reason scientists say that many geniuses have brilliant thoughts when they're in a bad state of mind. The head of Franklin Cosmetics is used to listening to his inner voice, trying to pay less attention to the heavenly flood. He started the car and drove out of the parking lot. And for the second one, I was satisfied with the decision. In this weather, Phil only drink vodka. The man grinned sadly at his house and muttered. And the occasion was perfect. Or rather to say, you can't think of a worse one. Franklin thought for the first time today that fate was mocking him. One setback after another, and he had no time to dodge the blows. The thought flashed through my mind again. It's as if someone had put a curse on me on purpose. The man immediately pushed the thought away, because he did not believe in Moldavian nonsense, but he could not explain the succession of business failures either. There was no one to consult on this issue either. Therefore, the businessman decided that there was nothing better than to get drunk. In general, of course. There were, of course, at first thoughts that it was all grandmother. The first wives about her said all sorts of things. But then he found out that she was dead and scolded himself. How can you believe in all kinds of damn things? Well, it's something else. It's more like a streak that's gone on too long. It's got to end sometime. That's usually the way it goes. Franklin had never abused hard liquor, but he knew that it helped to clear his brain of unnecessary junk. He moved slowly down the street, trying to make out familiar landmarks through the veil of rain. Finally, the sign of a beer bar with the promising name Jolly Carp appeared in his field of vision. The logo of this party establishment contained not only letters, but also the image of a huge fish with a beaming smile. When Frank first graced the election with his presence, he asked the receptionist whether those who had come up with such a stunning advertisement with the fish must have taken a hefty dose themselves. Baffled by the receptionists, asked the client, "What made you think that?" Franklin blurted it out without thinking about the consequences. Yes, because a sober person is unlikely to come up with the idea of depicting fish of obscure breeds with a smile on his face. Long-haired man looked resentfully at the status visitor and corrected: the snout of fish is not a muzzle, but snouts. That's what biologists have decided to call that part. Franklin did not like to be corrected. He immediately decided to flaunt his knowledge and their theologians. If you dig that deep, these are the people who study fish. The manager couldn't object because it wasn't in his interest to scare away customers. After that incident, Franklin had several more times visited the bar, which, by the way, served very good quality beer. Today he decided to come here for an hour. The parking lot was about 100 meters from the bar, and the man had to cover this distance in the pouring rain because he forgot to take an umbrella and his suit was soaked through in less than a minute. Franklin, out of habit, raised his eyes upward to capture his reverence for the owner of the establishment. "Hello to you and your tassel, Mr. Karras." But the always cheerful fish this time greeted him with a sinister smile. Frank, by her own mustache, and quickly averted his gaze. "I definitely need to get very drunk, or I'll bite everyone." He went down the stairs, where he was greeted with a knowing smile by the familiar receptionist. "Mr. Franklin, what an unexpected surprise, Sam." That's what all the visitors called the receptionist, started fussing over a customer. This customer, of course, was not the best in terms of character, but he always gave good tips. Sam was ready to turn himself inside out for money. Money doesn't smell at all. It doesn't matter how it comes, as long as it's there. And he can smile once in a while, bend a little, Speak a little, in a way that pleases the client. Yes, you're soaked to the skin. Give me your jacket. We'll have it dry in no time. Frank threw off the top of his suit. Thank you, Sam. It's always a pleasure to come in this weather. You feel right at home here. Snatched by the praise, the receptionist withdrew, but reappeared a couple minutes later. He was about to offer the regulars a couple of new items on the menu. But Franklin made an emphatic hand gesture. Sam, I'm not in the mood for a tasting tonight. I'm ready to tear everyone apart, so I'd better take a classic rough to restore my composure. The manager's out of town, and I hear you. I'll send a waiter right over. Followed by the same careless gesture. I don't want to make a fuss. Be a friend. You bring the double portion yourself. Of course, if such a favor is not burdensome for you. The administrator turned off her eyes and became at this moment very similar to the carp pictured above the entrance. No, it is not difficult for me, even pleasant, to fulfill the request of our regular customer. But you, Mr. Franklin, as I noticed, are driving. Frank clapped the man on the shoulder. So you're still turning out your boy, keeping tabs on the customers. That's commendable. But you don't have to worry about me, Sam, because I never drive drunk. If I'm completely wasted, you can call me a cab. Sam, a full-chested drink up front. Of course, Mr. Franklin, whatever you want. The receptionist disappeared again behind the partition separating the kitchen block from the lounge, and soon returned with a tray on which he majestically gave a glass of almost liter containers. With a solemn look, the maitre d' pronounced our specialty, straight from the fridge, clammed up in his eyes. Franklin took one big sip. It tasted amazing. The receptionist departed with a smile. Franklin took another pithy sip. He sat for a few minutes, covering his eyes and enjoying the pleasant book that was quickly flowing down his body. The men physically felt the anxiety loosen its grip. The realization became clearer with each passing second. Someone unseen within him distinctly said to Franklin, "Perhaps the causes of your troubles are in your surroundings. You've forgotten that even the people closest to you can set you up. In the last few years, you've become very self-confident in general, and that's extremely dangerous for business." Franklin concentrated on that inner voice and didn't notice a local man with a hint of baldness approaching his table. Permission. Frank snapped out of a pleasant state of weightlessness and involuntarily looked at the stranger. "Excuse me, what did you say?" The stout man didn't even look embarrassed. "I thought you wouldn't mind if I landed at your table. It's so bad out, and it's dry and quiet in here." Franklin wanted to tell the impertinent man that the room was full of empty tables, but he beat him to it. "I noticed you right away, Mr. Franklin. You sat with such an expression on your face, as if you were sent into space without your consent. And you've decided to become a crewman, too." "Not exactly. I didn't just want to give you a little backup." The man accepted a mug of beer from the waiter, then carefully wiped his hands with a napkin. Only then did he properly introduce himself as Ethan the lawyer. Franklin shook the outstretched hand, but did not answer anything. Ethan took this silence as a sign of approval and continued, "Actually, I'm a corporate lawyer, and I could be useful to you." Franklin looked into the smug face of his interlocutor. How much Ethan, and committed his glass, and took up his napkin again. "I think we can agree on a price." Franklin was beginning to be annoyed by this unknown lawyer. "Ethan, tell me honestly, who sent you? You don't think I'm naive enough to believe the fairy tale that you just happened to be in this bar? It's in this kind of bad weather." Ethan nasty, hey. "You should be an investigator, not the CEO of a cosmetics company. You scanned me right through. I can't get away with it now. But you're right. I won't deny that I'm here for a reason. The fact is, your wife Maria asked me to help. I've had time to study your problem, and I want to tell you that." Franklin abruptly cut the lawyer off. "For a handsome fee, I can weave my way out of anything. Ethan, I'm not new in business, and I understand perfectly well that my situation has practically no positive way out. The lawyer's got it on the table, but hope dies last. And if Mr. Ethan, I will not throw away money on a hopeless venture, especially the company is currently stuck on the shoals. But Frank the businessman stood up, making it clear that the conversation was over. If I need your help, I will definitely find you. All the best to you. Franklin passed by, pulled him into a string by the receptionist, forgetting to tip him. The businessman was again overwhelmed with the most negative emotions. Already on the way out, he remembered about his jacket and returned to the hall. Sam silently handed him the items of clothing and received for the obliging money bonus. The maitre d' bowed, and with the practiced movement of a magician, slipped the bill into his pocket. "Mr. Franklin, would you like to call a cab?" Franklin grumbled grudgingly. "No need. I'll get there in my car." Sam said nothing and glanced at the table where the glass was almost full. The cosmetics firm owner's casual companion had also disappeared unnoticed, leaving a few small banknotes on the table. The celestial bacchanalia was gradually decreasing, and only small rains were monotonously pounding on the sidewalk. Franklin's mood continued to sour, and he was no longer trying to restrain himself. When Kevin ran out into the hallway and threw himself on his neck, he released himself from his son's embrace rather roughly. "Kevin, you almost knocked me over. See, Daddy's tired." The 8-year-old grudgingly muttered, "Dad, you need to go to the hospital and have the doctor check you out. You're always angry and tired. I wanted to have a serious talk with you." The man tried to correct his mistake. "Son, we'll definitely talk, but only a little later. Where's Mom?" Kevin waved his hand toward the kitchen without words and lowered his head, which meant an extreme degree of resentment. He wandered into the nursery. The head of the family walked in the direction indicated, and the tension reached the maximum mark. At the moment when Maria said with a smile, "You are so early today, and I'm still with dinner," there was nothing provocative in the woman's tone. But Franklin got angry all, how nice we say it, like a caring bird. "Only your concern for Maria is getting on my nerves. Why did you send that idiot to me?" Tears glistened in the woman's eyes, but her voice didn't waver. "Why did you attack me from the doorstep? Explain things to me like a human being. What happened?" The wife's calmness added another spoonful of oil to the fire of the family scandal. "Don't play the innocent. Why did you send that stupid lawyer to me?" Marina adopted a defensive posture. The noisemaker in her hand looked like a symbol of feminine determination. "If you haven't forgotten, dear, I also work in the company you head, so I have every right to make decisions to save our common child. The man even jumped in the seat of our common." "I heard you. Since when did Franklin Cosmetics become your property?" Such a violent reaction of the woman clearly did not expect. She started gulping for air. "But I'm your wife, so I have the right." Franklin cut her off halfway through. "That doesn't mean anything. I have to tell you that your status gives you absolutely no benefit. You're nothing, and I'm nothing. And I'm the only one who can make decisions. Of course, as a board member, you can make suggestions, but you realize it's a conditional structure because I make the final decision." We took our frustrations out on the wife. Franklin has already calmly said, "And from now on, I'm going to ask you very nicely. Don't poke your nose where you're not wanted." It was said so harshly that Maria could no longer hold back her tears. She cried and shouted, "All right, I won't say another word. But I want to remind you, Franklin, that once, as you believe, your company was saved precisely because of my intervention. Too bad you have such a short memory." Franklin had never seen Maria in such a lost state. Some distant string twitched in his heart, and he approached his wife, trying to embrace her. But the muzzle pushed him away. "Don't touch me. You think only of yourself and your ambition. Don't you care for the rest of us? I've been told how ugly you were to Lucy by your first wife. I was naive, believing only your stories. I thought it was all people talking about you out of jealousy. Now I realize it was you who was the stumbling block." Franklin listened to his wife, but could say nothing against her. Because in her desperate monologue, he heard the answer to the question that had long tormented him. What was the reason for his chronic failures? Meanwhile, the woman continued, but more calmly. "You, Franklin, are used to command. but the responsibility is always shifted to someone else's shoulders. That's what happened when you got involved with the crooks last year, who supplied us with a substandard substance, and the whole batch went bad. In case you've forgotten, that was a multi-million-dollar loss. It would seem that a sensible person should draw conclusions after such a serious mistake. But you jumped into a new adventure. You never think about anyone but yourself. You don't care about the people on the street. If the company goes under the hammer, Frank will clench his fists and growl. I'm sure we'll pay up. We just have to come up with something workable, but unconventional. The woman glared angrily. You sit there and think, and I'll wash my hands of it. In fact, I'm convinced that this time the company will not be able to swim out. Sorry, my dear husband, but I really look at the current situation and see that your firm is going down. Only a miracle can save it. That's the reason I turned to Ethan. But since you don't like my intervention, I haven't lifted a finger. Marina, with her head held high, headed for the exit for a second, stopped at the door, and don't you dare yell at me ever again. Man, heard the wife deliberately loudly called her son and ordered him, Kevin, get ready to go to Grandma's house for a visit. Daddy needs to get some rest and get his nerves in order. Soon the front door slammed, and he was left alone with his unhappy thoughts. Quarrels with his wife had happened before, but in the last year and a half they had become more frequent, which annoyed Franklin greatly. The same situation was in the last years of his previous marriage, so he could not understand what women wanted from him and why they are always dissatisfied with everything. Pondering over this problem, the man made himself an omelet and ate dinner without appetite. He thought that Maria had become too bold, and it was time for her to be restrained. And then Lucy, his first wife, came to mind again, because he had decided to do the same procedure with her. But always docile. Women catch his every word. Suddenly, she disagreed. Clearly, Franklin could not forgive her for such an act of defiance. The recollection brought back unpleasant thoughts. Franklin threw the plate into the sink with irritation. He wanted to find solace near the television, but the image of his first wife made it impossible to concentrate on the plot of a thrilling action movie. What the hell is this? I think it's a bad omen. Damn stress. The man again went to the kitchen and poured himself a full shot of vodka. Anxious visions immediately disappeared, and Franklin, to consolidate the effect, poured another half shot of hot liquid spilled over the faithful. And he, as recently in the bar, felt incredible lightness. Folk remedies are better than pills. Franklin said this optimistically and put the mortgage bottle back in the refrigerator. He went back to the television and began clicking the remote control buttons without the same irritation. The booze had weakened his body so much that Franklin didn't notice that he had fallen asleep. All night he dreamed. Lucy. But this night vision caused nostalgia because irrevocably lost to him time when he was really happy. Insistent alarm clock signals forced Franklin to open his eyes to those feelings that he again experienced in the dream. Did not leave the man, and all day long he suddenly irresistibly wanted to talk to his father, and he even intuitively reached for the phone, but immediately pulled his hand away from the device. What is this obsession? I'm definitely not myself. After all, Dad died 3 years ago. Carl was widowed early and raised his only son by himself. He was a renowned scientist in plant genetics. But despite his high status, he preferred simplicity and modesty in everyday life. He also tried to instill in his son an ascetic lifestyle. Franklin, remember that domestic comfort and other excesses make a person addicted. Up to a time, the guy accepted these rules and even tried to imitate his father. But in adolescence, everything changed, and he reminded his father every chance he got. Dad, I do not want to deliberately deprive myself of an interesting life. Small pleasures don't spoil a man. How do you say? They add to his existence, and I don't want to deny myself that. Carl tried to change his son's mind for a while, but then he gave up. He didn't have the time to indoctrinate his little boy with life-tested truths. After all, The elder Franklin combined scientific activity and teaching his favorite subject. The professor was often invited to the educational institutions of neighboring countries to give lectures, and he almost never refused such events. Franklin many times tried to remind his father that such a strenuous rhythm of work is dangerous to his health, to which Carl philosophically answered his son, "My life itself is dangerous, so I see no point in limiting myself, because what is destined to happen cannot be avoided anyway." That's how son and father lived, trying to stay out of each other's way. But everything changed with the arrival of Lucy. At one of his visiting lectures, Carl met a student who amazed him with her broad knowledge of biology. Emotions were bursting out of the professor's soul, as there was no one but his son in the house. He shared his joy with him. "Franklin, I never imagined that our land gives birth to such bright talents. You know, the other day I was giving a lecture at the academy and had the good fortune to meet an amazing girl. Imagine, she had me, a professor, under her belt in every sense of the word." Franklin asked for the sake of propriety, "Who's the girl?" Carl came to life. At first glance, a girl of what 1,000. She came from a small district center. Since childhood, she's been interested in floriculture. She entered the biotechnology department at the academy on the dictates of her heart. After graduation, she's going to go into agribusiness. Franklin could not hide his surprise for a girl, of course, an unusual hobby. "But father, you yourself know very well that in youth everyone makes grandiose plans." And then the professor interrupted his son unequal all by himself. "You're lazy. I've already come to terms with it. That girl has a fountain of ideas spilling out of her." Amazing ideas. The father's delight was a painful blow to Franklin's ego. The son barely managed to interrupt the flow of his father's eloquence. "Dad, stop. You know how first impressions are often deceptive." The professor waved his hands. "No, son, my gut has never failed me yet. This girl definitely has a business sense. It just needs to be channeled into a fruitful direction. Father, you've intrigued me enough to make me want to meet this new Eliza Doolittle." Carl froze, but his confusion lasted only a few seconds. "You shouldn't say that, Franklin. You're not Henry Higgins to play the aristocrat either." "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't choose the right example. But I really want to meet this girl. You described her so vividly," the elder Franklin. "I was flattered by the praise and agreed right away. All right, I'll arrange for you to meet her. But Franklin, I'm warning you, no more of that Franklin stuff." Franklin crossed his arms over his chest. "Father, I swear I'll behave like a true gentleman." At that time, Franklin could not have thought that meeting a pretty provincial girl would change his life dramatically, although the girl could not be called a beauty. But the charm in her was in excess. From Lucy emanated so much energy that once Franklin jokingly said, "Lucy, you can connect to charge phones and other electronics." The girl grinned. "You're not alone in that observation. When I was very young, my grandfather used to tell his fellow villagers that I was a battery-powered robot. Your grandfather has a great sense of humor. Franklin, you wouldn't believe it, but they believed him. But the locals interpreted the joke in their own way. They spread rumors that Herb's granddaughter's heart wasn't real, but a motor. Everyone felt sorry for me and gave me candy. I wish Grandpa was gone. But we often go to the village, so Grandpa's house is not empty." Franklin found this story funny. "I've never been to the village. Are there really such naive people there?" "No, they're just ordinary people. And the craving for rumors is an indispensable element that saves you from boredom." Just a few days with Lucy didn't go unnoticed by Franklin. After all, in addition to positive energy, the favorite of the professor distinguished herself and a sharp mind. One day the girl confessed to him, "Franklin, if I had a different amount of money, I would open a cosmetics company." The guy was surprised, "But you don't know anything about it." Lucy laughed. "I am profoundly mistaken, because at the heart of every cream elk or shampoo, plant extract, by the way, is a profitable direction, because half of humanity is women." The young man immediately caught on to the idea. "Lucy, there's something in what you say. Franklin could not find the right word for a long time, but he spit on this trifle and moved on to the next point. By the way, many men are also not strangers to the pursuit of beauty. Personally, I'm very interested in your idea. Tell me, what would you call your company? After all, it is an essential part of the brand. Lucy grinned with geniality. Look how promising Franklin Cosmetics or Franklin Youth sounds. That's just me thinking off the top of my head. It's the first thing that came to mind. Franklin's already pictured himself in a future presentation. This picture inspired him so much that he took the girl in his arms and danced with her. Lucy, you, my fairy, are a true enchantress. The irrepressible joy of the young man was explained by the fact that he still could not find his place in the sun. After graduating from the Institute of Chemistry and Technology, the professor's son worked only a year in his specialty. Franklin did not want to work for the state from the beginning. 2 attempts to start his own business ended in complete failure. Meeting Lucy breathed new hope into him, and he decided to keep the girl to himself for a higher purpose. He proposed to her. Although Lucy understood perfectly well that the young man does not have tender feelings for her, she agreed to become his wife. Their union turned out to be successful both in life and in business. But the period of prosperity lasted until Franklin one day did not meet Maria. Lucy was losing badly in appearance against the background of a sophisticated rival who had perfect body shapes. In fact, Franklin's main irritating factor was his wife's fullness. Lucy, and before marriage, was not thin. And after the birth of a daughter, Cindy, and even kinder, Franklin humiliated his wife in every possible way, did not hesitate to compare her to a famous animal. One insatiable fall day, a loving husband told Lucy, "I can no longer live with you, because I met a woman with whom it is not ashamed to appear in decent society." This confession was unexpected for the young woman, and she did not even immediately realize what had happened. "Franklin, that was a bad joke. I could be offended." My husband sarcastically remarked, "I don't give a damn about your resentments for a long time. You're making a fool of yourself. A village in a word. Let's not get into details. Let's just go our separate ways." But I can't, and I don't want to. I put everything into this company. Franklin, you laughed. Yes, it's my credit and my money. If it weren't for me, your worthless ideas would be lost for lack of demand. Franklin had a lot of nasty things to say to his wife. He concluded his speech by asking her to clean up the place as soon as possible. Now the man was horrified to think of the act, and he burst out involuntarily. "Yeah, buddy, you were a scumbag. How else can you call a man who threw his wife and little daughter out the door?" It didn't surprise him that it was the first time he'd thought of his daughter in 10 years. More than anything else, the businessman was concerned about the fact that March, for whose sake he threw out his first wife, today supported not him and the former rival. Men quietly said yes. Female solidarity is a great power. After a moment's thought, he threw a question into the void. "I wonder where Lucy is now." "Probably somewhere in the countryside, scrounging for food." Frank was not wrong about one thing. His first wife had indeed settled in a small Belarusian village. True, she did not study, as Franklin thought, but lived and worked there for her own pleasure. That morning at summer sunset, Lucy was going to cook oatmeal porridge for 2 people according to tradition, but found that there was no beggar's molasses of salt in the house. Cindy sat at the table waiting for breakfast, but realized from the confused expression on her mother's face that the morning meal had been postponed until later in the day. The girl tossed her spoon with irritation. "Mom, are we out of something again?" The woman smiled at her daughter. "You guessed it. And that this time salt, sugar, milk, cereal." Cindy listed gastronomic nominations and did not even try to hide her displeasure. Lucy became guilty. "No salt. It was there yesterday, but today it's gone. I've been distracted lately." Cindy had a caustic remark. "The mice must have eaten all the salt. They love salt. They just can't live without it." The girl stood up abruptly from the table, and the table toppled to the floor with a clatter. Lucy shuddered. "Cindy, would you mind holding your grudge? It's no big deal. It's a 2-minute walk to the store. You run and get the salt. And we're together." The 15-year-old selfishly curled his lips in disdain. "Why me, Mom? Is that your fault? It's up to you to fix it. Everyone's used to it." "Cindy, run over there. Cindy, bring it." Her daughter accompanied her private speech with facial expressions and gestures that gave her mother a fit of laughter. "My girl, that's the way it is. You're the youngest in the family, and you're the one who has to run these errands." Cindy almost screamed. "I don't want to be the errand girl. Maybe I have plans of my own." The girl's voice became a little bit more serious. Lucy peacefully said, "Okay, if it's so difficult for you to run to the village shop, I'll go myself. And there's no need to get hysterical over such a trifle." Cindy snapped at her. "Mommy, it's not because of me, but because of your fault that all the fuss has broken out. Any normal housewife knows which products she has in the house and which ones are running out." And you mother laughingly interrupted her daughter. "Even if it is not a normal hostess, but it is also here is not a stranger. You could have followed the food supplies, seeing that your mother is closing. I have so much to do. I don't have time to breathe." Cindy remained silent, stepping her eyebrows together. Lucy decided that this was a good time to do some parenting. "I don't like you talking all day long. You could help me at least once in a while. I don't demand much from you." The girl grimaced again, interrupted her mother. "No, Mommy, you can't lure me into that trap. Not your plantation. That's where it stands." Cindy ran her hand over her throat, and for added effect, he flicked his tongue. "And I'm not going to follow your example, Mom. This means that our family succession is impossible. So this option is completely off the table." The woman looked at her daughter fondly. "Do you look like a wet Borgia now?" Cindy flashed his eyes angrily. "Thank you for not comparing me to a worm or a frog, but you can say whatever you want, and I still won't change my attitude to your business." The girl made quotation marks with her fingers and headed for the entrance. But her mother caught her by the arm. "My daughter, you can change your plans 100 times, if you have any. I'm not going to force you. But as a mother, I have a right to know what your plans are. Admit it. Where do you want to put your energy?" The girl rounded her eyes and beautiful, spreading her arms as if she wanted to cover the whole universe. "Mom, I dream of becoming a model. After all, you will not deny that for this I have all the data and face and figure." Cindy threw her mother a glance, but Lucy answered the Harris in an admonishing tone. "Besides what you named, it's also good to have a brain in your head. The professional life of models is very short, 10 years at most. And then there's no 100% guarantee you'll get selected. There are plenty of pretty girls out there. That's why there's so much competition in the modeling business." Apparently, Cindy was puzzled by her mother's warning. She thought for about a minute and then said cheerfully, "Bullshit. If I don't sneak into modeling, I'm going to go into acting. Even the teachers at school tell me that with my looks I'll be able to be on stage or on the catwalk." Lucy sighed heavily. "You've got your head full of nonsense." The girl exclaimed, "Mom, but you do not want me to spend my life stuck in this village. What's wrong with our village? Everything. Everything here is stupid, and the people are stupid and dull. If you knew what they were saying about you, you would have run away from here a long time ago." Lucy grinned. "I know my bones are always going through the motions, but I haven't paid attention to it in a long time. And about the Cindy people, I want to tell you that you still have to grow and grow to reach their level. And don't use that kind of language in front of me." A blush broke out on the girl's cheeks, and she breathed heavily. Lucy decided to further exasperate her daughter. "What are you flaring your nostrils like a pack mare? You don't like criticism. Get used to it. You'll meet other things in life." Cindy was all, "Get it, get it, get it, get it, get it, get it. How annoying is that?" And out the door. Lucy put her daughter's overturned table in its place and sank down tiredly on it, all in her father, as powerful and self-assured. The woman very rarely remembered her husband, who had practically kicked her out of the house along with her young daughter. But lately, Cindy had so often demonstrated not the best sides of her character that the comparison of her with her father came off her tongue. Maybe she'll grow out of it. After all, I too was desperate at that age, arguing with my parents and grandfather. And then he settled down. Although my life can hardly serve as an example, and I do not wish my daughter such a fate, this short monologue helped to put my nerves in order. The woman once again, for some reason, looked in the cupboard where the spices were stored. I'll have to go for salt myself. I'll go to the plot after lunch, when the heat dies down a little. Despite the tangible approach of fall, the last days of August were tropical heat, so Lucy added to her modest closet stylish hats with huge brim. She barely glanced in the mirror and half-heartedly characterized her outfit. Of course, a dress and a hat was not a good combination. Yes, for a trip to the village shop, this outfit would do. The woman took her straw bag, with which she always went to the store, and headed in the direction of the outlet. But she had to show up on the main street, and there were only 5 streets in the parade. How did it become noticeably lively in the yards along the main thoroughfare of the village? The first florist noticed Grandmother Helen, who swarmed on her plot near the fence. The elderly woman immediately childishly broke her back and ran up to the gate. "Oh, Lucy, I didn't recognize you at first. I wondered what kind of a hottie in a hat was here. And it turns out to be you." Lucy politely said hello to the old woman and continued on her way. But it wasn't so easy to get rid of Grandma Lena. This woman smelled the scent of sensation from a mile away. And now she also galloped after Lucy. "Lucy, where are you running to?" The woman stopped. "Helen, to the store in a hurry." Granny perked up. "Wait, I'll walk you to the corner. I've got something I need to find out. I've been wanting to consult with you for a long time. I haven't had the chance. I'm listening. Don't worry about it. I won't keep you long. I wanted to ask you something. You're the only scientist in the village. You graduated from the academy, so you know about herbs. In the parade, it was customary to start an important conversation with an approach. Bavalina's introductory part turned out to be too long, and Lucy did not hide her impatience. "Helen, healing herbs and flowers. They're a little different concepts, but I will gladly help you if it is in my power. What you wanted to ask me?" Yes. I'm interested in those ethics that you breed. Tell me, is it true that they help with coughs to get rid of annoying Granny? Farmer said lavender is useful for many diseases, but about this you'd better ask our doctors. I only know that to treat bronchitis take the roots, and they prepare them in a special way. How? Don't you know? Although Lucy knew several recipes for lavender-based remedies, she didn't want to talk to Helen's grandmother anymore. "Helen, I'm not a doctor." The old woman's eyes shot several key lightning bolts in her direction, but Lucy ignored the old woman's displeasure and hurried toward the store, which already showed itself at the end of the street. "Sorry, Helen, I really don't have time." She was being followed. "Look, what a proud farmer she is. How long has it been since Elia was transferred? I remember when you were barefoot in the village with the boys. You must have forgotten how you destroyed the roof of my barn." The village troublemaker didn't stop listing Lucy's past sins, and when she got to the store, at the same time she recalled all the offenses she had suffered from the family bunny, with whom in the old days Helen had been friends or enemies. The elderly scandalized woman was so engrossed in her denunciation that she did not immediately notice her waddling towards the store. Stephen was formerly a farm manager, and after his retirement, he decided to take up community work. He took to his duties immediately. "Helen, what are you doing out here?" Screaming in a bad voice, scaring people. Granny put her foot forward. "And who are you that I have to answer to you?" Stephen proudly puffed out his chest, like a village chief. "I have the right to know." Granny stomped her feet in huge galoshes. "Who elected you?" "He appointed himself headman. And you're making demands. You'd better tell people how you go to the farm at night. How many bags of mixed fodder have you stolen?" To put up with such insolence, even from a former lover. In his mature years, Stephen, often dropped by the lonely milkmaid village headman, could not, despite the literacy, which was the result of an old injury, the man also took the appropriate look and even tried to step on the opponent. Helen, I won't look that you're a woman on crutches. You've got that way with your spoons on blood everything. The offended grandmother agreed to the whole street. Good people, what's going on? The headman is threatening me. At the exhausted screams of the old woman, Wendy, the sales clerk, jumped out of the store. The mere sight of this dimensional lady sent shivers down the spine of the exuberant shoppers. The saleswoman looked angrily first at Helen. Then she said, "Hey, you old robbers, settle down nicely. Otherwise, I will be forced to take harsh measures against you." The arguers instantly quieted down because they knew that Wendy did not throw words into the wind. Helen whispered something under her breath and headed towards her house, while Stephen sat down on a bench outside the store. Wendy returned to her workplace and to the questioning looks of several customers. She said, "Yes, they're at it again, Helen. They're all in a tizzy. They're fighting like little children. I can't even believe that people of such an age can have battles." "You never know," Lucy said thoughtfully to Wendy, "but it's true. Not without reason they say that old people fall into childhood. It is a natural phenomenon. A person is born, grows up, reaches the peak of his development, and then the reverse process begins." The saleswoman pressed her lips together. "You know best. You're a scientist. There's one thing I don't understand. What are you studying in this dump? What the hell do you need a flower plantation for? If I were you, would I have moved closer to the capital or left the USA long ago? You have a lot of money. What's keeping you in our village?" Lucy shrugged her shoulders and smiled stupidly at Wendy. "Surprisingly, that's the second time this morning I've been asked that question. I myself can't figure out what keeps me here. The land, I guess." The woman paid for her purchase and headed for the exit. But on the street, she suddenly remembered that she had forgotten the salt. Wendy looked at the returning customer with understanding and how she had forgotten to buy salt. Lucy looked at the retailer with surprise. "Wendy, can you read minds? With you that not only start guessing thoughts from behind the cuckoo. Soon, we'll have to do telepathy and magic. He'll wake up by tonight and come back here. They're gonna ask for a promissory note, and I'll have to listen to their hangover ravings." The women in line began to express sympathy for Wendy, and Lucy stuffed the packet of salt into her bag and headed home with a sense of accomplishment. To avoid running into Helen's grandmother again, Lucy took a roundabout way back. All the way she thought about Wendy's words, and after a short consideration came to the conclusion that there was a special charm in country life. Perhaps it was this very fact that was the invisible magnet that attracted and would not let go of the heart. "Merlot," Cindy said something to herself as she fiddled with the stove. Lucy asked in surprise, "You're on the run?" Without turning around, she replied cheerfully, "I changed my mind. You could say that your words had an effect on me. I was so ashamed that I immediately decided to correct myself. One more minute, and our book will be ready." Cindy Shorter had a big spoonful of brew in the pot. Lucy walked into the kitchen. "You decided to diet porridge to boil without salt. Why without poison was necessary in product?" Betty did. "Why did she show up at the end of summer?" The woman's voice trembled. And Cindy was finally distracted from cooking. But the girl forgot about the friend who'd lent her the salt because she was startled by the sight of her mother. She clapped her hands. "Mom, did you dress like that and paraded around the village?" "Yeah. What's wrong with it?" "Well, it's a killer outfit. The dress is in style. Not alone. I used to do it in the field. And a fancy hat. Betty's dad's here too, by the way. I can imagine his eyes would roll if he saw you in that outfit." Lucy shouted with annoyance at her daughter Cindy, "Stop criticizing your mother. Did you also walk around the village dressed in such a way that I am sometimes ashamed of you? How many times have I told you not to wear those shitty pants? You have a closet full of clothes. You could pick something decent, and you shouldn't believe it. Lavender is not a demanding crop, and it feels very comfortable on our soils. With the right technique, you can achieve a profitability of 200%. Andrew was not impressed by these statistics, and he stubbornly said, "I don't believe it." Herbert shouted at his son, "What have you got?" "I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Let the girl try. Maybe she'll do something good. Besides, there's a lot of land here that we don't own. The authorities will be glad to have someone to take care of their culture." But Andrew didn't give up. "But you need seed money to start a business. And as far as I'm concerned, Franklin's got you pantless." Miranda mumbles it's a good thing he let us out alive. "Yeah, he gave me my stuff. And we'll help with the money with Grandpa. We have some savings for a rainy day." Lucy decided to start her own business with a small plot of land. Only the question of marketing the aromatic products remained unsolved. But her childhood friend Alex helped her. Fate brought them together in childhood, when their parents took them to the village on vacation. Although Alex was older than Lucy by 4 years, the age difference did not interfere with their friendship. In the years of youth, the guy helped the girl out many times, and she always tried to look up to him. It was Alex who infected her with the idea of entering the agricultural academy. He himself also graduated from this educational institution with a red diploma and almost immediately settled firmly in the capital. Lucy kept in touch with her friend and knew that he held a high position in the ministry. After a short hesitation, she decided to remind her old friend about herself. Alex was glad to receive Lucy's call. "How great that you called. At the first opportunity I rushed over, so wait, don't move anywhere." Alex showed up in a parade literally on the 3rd day after the call. "Lucy, you have no idea how excited I am. Tell me about your life in the capital. I hear you're married to a serious woman." Bitterly smirked, turned around and curled up. "I have no husband, no company. All my efforts have failed. You know, Alex, it hurts so much to realize that the person you trusted infinitely just used you." Lucy spoke briefly about her failed family life and noticed that he was looking at her strangely. A hunch struck the woman. "Alex, do you have problems in your family too?" The man looked away. "Sort of, but I try not to dwell on it. Especially now, I don't want to spoil the mood. Better tell me, what are you going to do next?" After hearing about her friend's plans, the man began to actively support her. "Lucy, you are thinking right and have chosen what is now very necessary for enterprising people. We have the best time in our country nowadays, and it is possible to take a loan for business development. And with the marketing of products, we will definitely think of something. Can you trust me to solve this issue?" A week later, Alex called and said that there is an opportunity to conclude an agreement with a well-known cosmetics company. The firm is very dear to its reputation, so cooperation with it will open the green light for you. But you must understand that you will have to undergo a number of laboratory tests. Lucy was ready for any tests. She was happy that things were moving in a positive direction. But suddenly there was another beneficiary, retired Colonel Beekeeper. When the plantation's lavender bloomed. The next year, Benjamin set up his hives nearby, and he didn't even warn the owner of the plot about it. Benjamin became the culprit of the first troubles of the novice flower farmer. That summer morning, Lucy did not know what awaited her on the plot, which she cared for as a living being. Together with her daughter, she went to the plantation early in the morning to assess the blooming activity. She and Cindy had no sooner reached their destination than they were attacked by bees already stiffening their brains and bodies. It was only her daughter's screams that made the woman take the right action as calmly as possible. The girl jumped out into the hallway and started fidgeting in front of the mirror. Normal pants and holes are the most fashionable trend. Lucy glanced at the wall clock. "Cindy, you've been giving me head since this morning for almost 10, and I haven't done anything yet. Let's have breakfast. Let me do the handouts today, and you do the squats. Mommy, get some rest. Maybe we can go to Betty's tonight." The girl deftly distributed the porridge on party plates and herself sat down opposite her mother. Lucy could tell from her burning eyes that the girl was up to something, and this hint of Alex's arrival was not accidental. Cindy thought that she and her former childhood friend had a secret affair. but their relationship was strictly business. Lucy started the porridge, reminding Cindy of her daughter. I don't have time to come by tonight to pick up the raw materials, and I haven't looked in the sushi tree yet today. If you have any more questions for me, tell me as soon as possible. Cindy took a long look at her mother, and Lucy saw something in her eyes that she had not noticed before. Softer now, she said, why don't you say something? My cub. The girl began to rub the edge of the tablecloth. What was a sign of great excitement. Mom, you just don't take offense at me, but I've been meaning to ask you about Dad for a long time. Betty has such a great dad. You're all I have. I was just a little girl, and I don't remember much of that other life. Cindy looked away, as if she were afraid her mother would read in her eyes what she was trying to hide from her. But Lucy said quite calmly, I don't want to remember that man. He has ceased to exist for me. Mom, he's my father. Doesn't he want to see me? I can't tell you that. But judging by the fact that he's never called or written in 10 years, he's not interested in your fate. Cindy looked her mother in the eye again. Mom, maybe he just doesn't know where you took me. The woman drew her daughter close to her. He knows everything. I even sent him a picture of you, but he didn't reply. That's it. Let's not bring it up again. Aren't we living well together? Lucy tried to sound cheerful, but her voice was sad. Cindy, I'm going to be a teacher. And you wash the dishes and put the house in order. The daughter answered nothing, and the mother realized that she was under the impression of talking about her father. But the woman knew very well that one day the time would come, and she would have to tell her daughter everything. And that hour had come. The old heart wounds reminded themselves again, and the thought flashed through her mind that no matter how many times she chased away the past, it would still be knocking at the door. Lucy checked until late in the evening, ready to send to the customer raw materials, all the while reminiscing about her failed marriage. When Lucy informed her immediate family that she was marrying the son of a Moscow professor, her mother and father were shocked. But her grandparents rejoiced at the news like children. Miranda, despite her granddaughter's warning, spread the news all over the neighborhood. Herbert later reprimanded his wife. What is it with you and getting ahead of yourself? And if the wedding is upset, what will you say then? Miranda felt guilty, though. She decided to argue with her husband. If you keep your mouth shut, then nothing will happen. Got into the habit of predicting things ahead. I'm just not in the habit of jumping to conclusions. You know what they say, don't say shit before you jump. And you, Miranda, you're getting ahead of yourself. Do you know what our tongues are like? And you can't share with anyone here. What's Helen's grandmother? After a stern reprimand from her husband, Miranda shut her mouth. But it was too late. Her granddaughter's wedding was coming up. The whole neighborhood knew them. When Lucy dropped by the old folks' house for the day, she was harassed by the local women. Tell me, how did you manage to land a fiancé from the capital? You don't seem to be anything special. How did you get the other neighbors? I was only interested in the material part. Lucy, he's rich. That wife is in shock. The girl didn't answer such questions because she knew that every word she said would be turned upside down. There was another reason that kept her silent: fear of the evil eye. Such fears. She had been indoctrinated as a child by her grandmother, Miranda, who had worked for many years in the outpatient clinic as a nurse and was well versed in medicine. When the paramedic was absent from the medical station, she advised her fellow villagers on what to take for this or that ailment. Miranda was also well versed in herbal medicine, so her simple recipes usually had the expected effect. The rumor of the woman's clandestine practice reached the paramedic. The paramedic was very indignant and yelled at the woman in front of visitors. Miranda, I will not have you practicing medicine in my institution. I am obligated to report this egregious incident. But the woman was not intimidated by the medic's threats. Don't scare me. I could file a complaint against you too. You don't show up for work for days, and people come for help. You should be thanking me that I covered for you. After such disobedience on the part of the nurse, the paramedic decided to find a replacement, but no one would accept such a vacancy. Even the locals refused. For that kind of salary, let him crush his own floors. The confrontation ended with the fact that the paramedic came to house and began to beg her former subordinate, "Miranda, I'm sorry if I offended you unintentionally. Come back to the outpatient clinic, or I'm as handless without you." The woman didn't agree right away. She decided to torture the offender a little. Miranda had to intervene. He yelled at his wife, "Why are you putting a price on yourself? If you want to leave a man, go to work." "He can't. I don't like a lot of things about the office either. But I put up with it because I know there is no one to replace me." Herbert worked in the accounting department for over 40 years. There were only 2 entries in his employment history: hired and retired. Lucy was proud of her elderly relatives and insisted that they attend her wedding. The bride's parents also made their mark at the celebration, but left the day after the wedding. And the old people stayed at the House of Beauty for a whole week. They immediately found a common language with Herbert, who every day arranged for them excursions to Washington. Franklin's father praised his daughter-in-law Lucy, a real miracle. "With her appearance in our apartment became brighter, and I will try to provide her with a job at our institute." Herbert was pleased with the praise of a noble relative, and he added that in our village all women are like that, and they don't burn in fire and don't drown in water. The professor promised, "As soon as I have free time, I will come to visit you." And so it was settled. Lucy was in the clouds, not noticing anything around her, but then her grandfather's voice revealed many flaws. Before leaving home, the old man called his granddaughter aside. "Lucy, here you are, Franklin's soul from the wormhole." The girl laughed. "Grandpa, it's just that you're used to measuring everything by country standards. It's different in the big city." The old man objected. "People are the same everywhere. I can spot a rotten one a mile away. Your Franklin ain't what he wants to be. You be on your guard with him." To appease your grandfather, Lucy promised to watch both of them. Of course, she soon forgot about that promise. She didn't think about her grandfather's fears either, because life in the capital had taken her on a whirlwind of its own. She and Franklin devoted themselves entirely to their common cause. Or rather, Lucy fed day and night over documents and new projects, and her husband pushed her. "Lucy, but try to finish this quickly. We don't have time. You realize there's so much money invested in this case. God forbid we fail. We'll be left with nothing." The young woman accepted the fact that she had to do all the rough work, and Franklin took on the search for partners and the legal part. Even during her pregnancy, Lucy worked at the same intense pace. She often complained to her husband, "Franklin, I can't take it much longer. Sometimes I feel like I'm going to fall down and never get up." The man would reassure his wife, "Lucy, you're strong." Your grandfather bragged to my father. I know Grandpa likes to show off himself and tell tales about his village too. Franklin, but even a strong woman needs rest, especially when she's in a position. After all, the constant tension can have a bad effect on our child. It was only after this powerful argument that Franklin made a small indulgence for his wife. But working to the point of exhaustion had done its evil work. The labor started early and was very difficult. After the birth of her daughter, Lucy turned her full attention to the child, which caused not only resentment, but also anger of her husband. Once Lucy did not hold back and also told Franklin everything she thought about him. "You treat me like a slave. You're just using me, without thinking about my health. I get the impression you don't even care about your daughter." The man was furious. "You should just keep your mouth shut and pray. Such fabulous luck doesn't come to everyone. Living the good life in downtown Washington, D.C., driving a fancy car. You dress in all the latest fashions, and you're not happy. So you're saying I should be jumping around and happy I'm in your service? It turns out that I have earned nothing and am worthless." Franklin laughed, "And in your face. Go to the mirror and look at yourself with your body weight. Maybe you can pull it off. $25. Lucy slapped her husband with a ringing slap. They didn't speak for a week, but Franklin gave in first. "Stop sulking. You pissed me off. I sassed you about your fullness, too. I said it without exaggeration. It's time you started working on your figure. But nothing was working for him. And she did not have time to attend a fitness club because everything was taken away by work. The company Beauty by Franklin expanded every year and profits increased. They had to look for new employees. Frank personally handled the search for staff. Therefore, Lucy was not aware of the latest changes. But one day she urgently needed financial documents, and together with her daughter, she went to the main office. What was her surprise when she saw a strange girl at her workplace? At home, she interrogated her husband. "Franklin, why is that pretty girl sitting at my computer?" The husband refused at first, but then he said, "To begin with, all office equipment is company property. As for your second comment, I can say that as the head of the company, I have the right to select staff without consulting my wife, EU. And you correctly pointed out that Maria is the name of this girl. It's very pretty. Perhaps I don't need to explain to you that clients and our partners evaluate the company by the appearance of employees, and Maria fully meet the most stringent requirements. They deserve to be the face of our firm." The young woman even took a breath from indignation. "So I'm ruining the image." "Exactly. And I've been asking you to take care of your body for a long time." That sounded insulting to the young woman. She started dieting again. She even went to see a nutritionist, but he told her not to torture yourself in vain because you'll never be model standard. You've been born broad-boned, but your weight is almost normal. So it creates a fullness effect that doesn't really exist. She returned home in high spirits. But Franklin wouldn't even listen to her. "You're just stupidly looking for an excuse for your weakness. But I don't insist. You like walking the cart. You're welcome." Soon Lucy learned that Franklin was dating Maria. "No, Cindy. They're very kind. Will Grandma cure your cough? She knows a lot of herbs. She won't give me an injection, I'm afraid." "No, my dear. We'll try to do without radical means of treatment." The girl such an explanation satisfied, and soon she already sweetly advised on the lap of her mother. At night, the traveler boarded the train, which was going through the territory. Herbert went out to get firewood when an unexpected guest showed up at the wicket gate. The unexpected illnesses fell out of the old man's hands. "Lucy, Lord, what are you standing there for? We have tea guests." But grandmother was already standing on the porch and crying from the sudden joy. She kissed first her granddaughter, then little Cindy, and said incessantly how good it was that we had waited for this day. "Now we can die now that the welcoming traditions have been honored." Miranda tearfully confessed to her granddaughter that her grandfather and "I had bad dreams about you all week. Tell us, what misfortune has befallen you?" But Lucy is so tired from the road and worries that belittling asked Grandma, "I'll tell you everything for sure. Only first Cindy and I must rest." In the evening, a family council met at the Herd's house. Lucy's parents also showed up in a couple by themselves. Upon learning of the arrival of her daughter and granddaughter, the young woman cried, and reliving again the recent events, she told her relatives in detail about how her husband had kicked her out. Herbert listened to her granddaughter with his eyes downcast, but his cheekbones were jaundiced, giving away his anger. Barely had Lucy fallen silent. The old man growled and spewed. "Tomorrow I'm going to go to fucking Washington, D.C., and I'm going to show that asshole where he belongs." Miranda started wailing again. "I don't want you to go to jail in your old age. Stay home, hero." The girl's father supported her mother. "Yes, father, it's better not to get involved with this scumbag. Believe me, he'll get a boomerang. That kind of thing doesn't go to waste, especially for a man." Although Franklin can only be called a man with a stretch, especially after doing something like that. Herbert said, "I told you he was rotten. I've never been wrong about people." The old man praised his abilities as a seer for a while, and then he said firmly, "You, Lucy, do not worry. T is not alone, and we will always help you. Have a rest. Gather your thoughts. Think of something to do." Andrew suggested a daughter. "I think that the best option is to look for a job in the district center. After all, you can get a job at school. You will be biology or botany to teach, and more useful fun will be among the kids, because she will soon go to school. Lucy looked at her family. Thank you for your support, but can I decide my own fate? Herbert grinned. Our breed, bunnies. I don't like to be decided for me either. Of course, granddaughter, you know best. How is a little one better for you? Just 2 days later, Lucy surprised her family. I thought it over and came to the conclusion that I will stay here in the village. Andrew asked with surprise, and what will you do business here? The relatives looked at each other. Grandfather even chuckled from the excess of impressions. We already have one businessman, a retired colonel. He raises bees, so he got everyone. Have you also decided to organize honey production? No, Grandpa. I've chosen a different kind of business. I'm going to grow flowers, have leased a plot of land, and will plant lavender chamomile hut. Herbert said disappointedly. That's the number of vodka he drank and died the next morning. I thought you had something serious in mind. Did you get rich on such a thing? The young woman's face was transformed. She excitedly began to talk about the amazing plant, which she had a special fondness for. Even during my studies, I studied this business direction well. In Europe, it is highly popular. We also have positive examples. Andrew confusedly waved his hands, Lucy. But I don't believe in such fairy tales that you can make capital by growing flowers. And you shouldn't believe it. Lavender is not a demanding crop, and it feels very comfortable on our soils. With the right technique, you can achieve a profitability of 200%. Andrew was not impressed by these statistics, and he stubbornly said, I don't believe it. Herbert shouted at his son, What have you got? I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Let the girl try. Maybe she'll do something good. Besides, there's a lot of land here that we don't own. The authorities will be glad to have someone to take care of their culture. But Andrew didn't give up. But you need seed money to start a business. And as far as I'm concerned, Franklin's got you penniless. Miranda mumbles it's a good thing he let us out alive. Yeah, he gave me my stuff. And we'll help with the money with Grandpa. We have some savings for a rainy day. Lucy decided to start her own business with a small plot of land. Only the question of marketing the aromatic products remained unsolved. But her childhood friend Alex helped her. Fate brought them together in childhood, when their parents took them to the village on vacation. Although Alex was older than Lucy by 4 years, the age difference did not interfere with their friendship. In the years of youth, the guy helped the girl out many times, and she always tried to look up to him. It was Alex who infected her with the idea of entering the agricultural academy. He himself also graduated from this educational institution with a red diploma and almost immediately settled firmly in the capital. Lucy kept in touch with her friend and knew that he held a high position in the ministry. After a short hesitation, she decided to remind her old friend about herself. Alex was glad to receive Lucy's call. How great that you called. At the first opportunity, I rushed over. So wait, don't move anywhere. Alex showed up in a parade literally on the 3rd day after the call. Lucy, you have no idea how excited I am. Tell me about your life in the capital. I hear you're married to a serious woman. Bitterly smirked, turned around and curled up. I have no husband, no company. All my efforts have failed. You know, Alex, it hurts so much to realize that the person you trusted infinitely just used you. Lucy spoke briefly about her failed family life and noticed that he was looking at her strangely. A hunch struck the woman. Alex, do you have problems in your family too? The man looked away. Sort of, but I try not to dwell on it. Especially now, I don't want to spoil the mood. Better tell me, what are you going to do next? After hearing about her friend's plans, the man began to actively support her. Lucy, you are thinking right and have chosen what is now very necessary for enterprising people. We have the best time in our country nowadays, and it is possible to take a loan for business development. And with the marketing of products, we will definitely think of something. Can you trust me to solve this issue? A week later, Alex called. and said that there is an opportunity to conclude an agreement with a well-known cosmetics company. The firm is very dear to its reputation, so cooperation with it will open the green light for you. But you must understand that you will have to undergo a number of laboratory tests. Lucy was ready for any tests. She was happy that things were moving in a positive direction. But suddenly there was another beneficiary, retired Colonel Beekeeper. When the plantation's lavender bloomed, the next year Benjamin set up his hives nearby, and he didn't even warn the owner of the plot about it. Benjamin became the culprit of the first troubles of the novice flower farmer. That summer morning, Lucy did not know what awaited her on the plot, which she cared for as a living being. Together with her daughter, she went to the plantation early in the morning to assess the blooming activity. She and Cindy had no sooner reached their destination than they were attacked by bees already stiffening their brains and bodies. It was only her daughter's screams that made the woman take the right action as calmly as possible. She said to the girls, "Cindy, don't scream without waving your arms around. The bees don't like that. Mommy, but they buzz so scary. I got stung by one bee already. Look at the hole in my arm. I also managed to get stung, but it is better to endure." A few minutes mother and daughter stood, taking hands. Lucy half-whispered said, "Comrade Colonel, I would put your bees in one place, so that they would not be allowed to place their hives anywhere." As soon as the bees were gone, angry at the infiltration, the farmer went to see the colonel. Benjamin was delighted by the young woman's visit. "Lucy, you've made me very happy. You won't believe it, but I was just thinking of you," the woman remarked with undisguised sneer. "What a coincidence, huh? After all, I was thinking about you too, and even mentioned you in an unkind word." The colonel raised his thick eyebrows. "Why so? What have I done to you?" "Benjamin, I am not a girl to be spoken to like that. You're the one who can mess with my Cindy's head. Who gave you permission to put your beehives on my land? Couldn't you at least give me a little warning? You hid them in the bushes and your aggressive bees stung me and my daughter." The child could have had a reaction to the stings. The woman was telling the man off, and he was smiling cheekily. "Lucy, I'm so sorry you were hurt. You're overreacting about the land. You're just a temporary tenant, not the owner. Therefore, your claim is baseless. You are mistaken, Mr. Benjamin, and I demand that you remove the beehives immediately. Put them in your yard and don't forget to open the windows." The colonel has backed down. "Lucy, maybe we can make a deal. I'll compensate you for moral damage." "Wait a second." The man disappeared in the doorway, but immediately returned and handed the woman a chocolate bar. Lucy was stunned by this insolence. "Eat your own chocolate and put away your bee boxes today. Otherwise, I'm poisoning them." Benjamin snapped, because bees were the most important thing to him. "Lucy, don't forget. I could report you to the police. I'll report you. I'll see my lawyer tomorrow. But I won't let you do anything illegal." Lucy was only determined until the evening. The next morning, she was laughing about yesterday's incident, but Benjamin set the wheels in motion, and soon his son showed up in the village. The woman was on a plot of land when he drove his car onto the plot. She rushed at him, screaming, "What are you doing? You're going to ruin all my flowers." The man was of impressive size, and even Lucy, with her lush physique, looked like a pathetic chicken against him. He started right away with threats. "Listen, you're a florist, and once again, Bake complains to me about lawlessness. You will have a pale look and macaroni gait. My apiary will be here." He turned around and walked at a leisurely pace to his car. Lucy was in some kind of eclipse. She took a few steps ahead on the X-No. "You listen to me, you scumbag. If I see hives on my property, congratulate all the bees and warn your daddy that if he doesn't stop the mayhem, he'll have to deal with my grandfather." The reference to my grandfather had a much greater effect than the threat to kill the bees. But the hives did not appear on the plantation again that summer. Lucy, but the rumor flew around the village that the farmer had promised to get rid of the colonel. Lucy found this out by accident when she went to the store to do some shopping. At her appearance in the village store, all at once quieted down. Even the word "Hunt Wendy" pulled her eyes out. Only Grandma Helen timidly asked, "Do you really have a gun?" Lucy stared at the elderly woman, then looked around with a surprised look at everyone present. "Dear countrymen, I rarely take it with me. More often, I use another object my grandfather has left from the war. He hides it in the attic." It was a shock for the wounded inhabitants of the small village. But the young farmer's dashing joke turned into another trouble. The next day, the neighborhood police came to their house in the early morning, when it turned out that the cause of the whole mess was Lucy's bad joke. The old people and the precinct officers laughed for a long time. But this story for several years walked around the neighborhood lady not from the soul of the locals. There was another side effect that hurt Lucy's business more than anything else. It did not show itself in its full force in the first year, but later when the farmer expanded her holdings, she found bald spots in her flower meadow on a daily basis. The local freeloaders usually raided at night. The woman tried to fight this lawlessness, but she could not catch the scoundrels in the act. Alex's daughter suggested a way out of her predicament. At that time, Irina was already 10 years old, and she studied in the elite Capital Gymnasium. The girl often came to them to play with Cindy. When she found out about the problem that Lucy couldn't solve, she advised her to put traps on the plot. The farmer didn't understand. "Betty, what traps are you talking about?" The girl squints her eyes slyly. "These are such devices to scare. They are different. There are those that fountains hit the face. There are sound. For example, a man came to a secret place, and he voiced from under the floor. She says, 'Put in place my candy.' You can put a horror movie in the trap." Repel means with a sound signal farmer. Purchased in the capital, when she went to the presentation of a new line of cosmetics based on Slavic oil. Returning home, the woman installed on the site repellent means of secret. Raiders managed to identify immediately on the first night, or rather, he himself showed up at the farmer's house to express his indignation to her. Lucy was very surprised to learn that for almost 3 years her possessions had been emptied by the village headman. Well, the elderly plunderer of other people's goods was not embarrassed by the fact that he was engaged in illegal activities. Stephen began to express his indignation to Lucy in raised tones. "I was almost killed by Condratius. Lucy, how can you scare decent people like that?" Decent people. Stephen does not climb in other people's gardens. To engage in such an unworthy business at your venerable age is very shameful. The headman said with resentment, "Do you feel sorry for the flowers? Why are they wasting away? I thought it wouldn't cost you anything if I picked some for myself." It turned out that the other villagers also had a craving for other people's goods. That's why Farmer She's plantation was constantly being raided. In order to somehow solve this problem, Lucy offered fellow villagers to buy their favorite flowers from her. She even offered a very reasonable price, but this option did not suit anyone. The headman regretfully said when for free is another matter, and to spend money on nonsense is not enough money. To get rid of Lucy's plunderers, they had to hire a watchman. After the next expansion of the plantation, she also hired 2 women who helped her to collect and dry raw materials. Each year the profits grew, and the U.S. farmer got her own car. She made major renovations to her grandfather's chorus, and even ran water and sewer to the house. The old people rejoiced. "Thank you, granddaughter, at least before she died. We will live in comfort." Lucy laughingly replied, "You're too early to die. It's time to enjoy life." Grandma was the first to die. Miranda wasn't sick or complaining about her health. She just went to sleep and never woke up. Herbert outlived his spouse by only 2 months. He had a stroke while chopping wood in the yard. The whole village buried the old man. Even the deputy of the village council showed up to say kind words about the man who had served his land faithfully. Alex, as usual, showed up without a warning call. Lucy was always happy to see her old friend and therefore immediately invited the guest to the kitchen. "Did you have dinner?" Orrin interrupted. The man sighed. "From you women cannot hide anything. You see everything. It's a pity that not everyone is as attentive and caring as you are." "I'm not used to complaining. but lately I've been using the catering services more often. Lucy sat down at the table, leaning on her arms, and I thought life didn't roll on a roller for ministry employees. Pardon the tautology. No, you're right. And an ice skating rink is the most appropriate way to define my crisis. All right, you go. You can tell me all about it later. You'll be the first. Alex said, "What's your first course?" "Soup." "And for the second, potatoes with sausages." Two hungry fires lit up in the man's eyes. "Let's have both." "Lucy, you have no idea how much I missed simple home-cooked food." It was evident by the appetite with which Alex emptied the plates. "Lucy, did you just save me from starvation?" "No, of course not. I could have dined at my old folks' place, but it's unlikely I would have reached them alive. It's good to have a loyal friend who is willing to share a crust of bread." The woman was still looking at him carefully. "Alex, you've got a lot on your heart. I can see it in your eyes. You and observant. However, you've always been like that. If you want to tell me, it'll make me feel better. Basically, I came to see you on a completely different matter. But to make a long story short, I'm really in a lot of trouble in my family. You could even say it's a disaster. Although, on the other hand, it's a common thing. My wife left me, found someone else." Did the man lock his hands together to cope with the excitement? "No, I didn't say that right. We had a bad life from the start." Vanessa said I didn't live up to her expectations. Lucy was stunned. "Oh my God. I didn't think ministerial officials would have problems like that." Ministers are human beings too. They marry and divorce like ordinary citizens. My wife and I have been divorced for 5 years, after I caught her with a very cool dude. But we decided to keep it quiet. Slowly, we moved out to different apartments. My daughter stayed with me, and my wife didn't mind this division of responsibilities. But now she's suddenly awakened a maternal feeling, and she wants to take Betty away through the court. But if I'm not mistaken, your girls are 13. They'll be 14 soon. She doesn't want to move in with her mother because there's another uncle living there. And honestly, I mean, hand on heart, we are so used to living together. No one drops on your brain. No one demands anything. Alex, I think you're worried for nothing. If the girl wants to stay with her father, no one can force her to live with her mother. That's right. But trying to prove anything to my wife is useless. She's stubborn. In your face. Anyway, Betty and I are getting on her nerves, stalking us. Even tried to force my daughter away. So I brought her here. The man looked her in the eye with a pleading look. "Lucy, would you do me the old-fashioned favor of watching my kid? I won't be in debt." "Alex, don't be silly." "Sure, I'll help you and the girls will have more fun together. Only with school. What to do? I take my star to the neighborhood every day. We don't have any elite high schools here. I don't know. Believe me, we don't need to show off right now. We need to get through this crisis. Vanessa and her husband are going to Germany for permanent residence, and she's persuading her daughter. And I already imagine in advance what it will be like in a foreign country, Alex." I said I agree. "You don't have to persuade me." Alex left, and the next day Betty moved in with them. Lucy thought that the girl would live with her relatives, but the girlfriends decided to unite under one roof. Cindy took her mother aside with a conspiratorial look. "Mom, aren't you angry that we're being uninvited?" The woman sighed. Would it make a difference? The daughter started hanging around her mother. "Mom and Betty will help you, honestly. We've already decided we're going to take over the cleaning, and Betty can cook. If you let us, we can pick flowers and dry them." Lucy jokingly swung a towel at her daughter. "Get out of here, you little bitch." But to her surprise, Lucy soon came to the conclusion that Irina's presence has a positive effect on her daughter. In the relationship of the girls appeared even competitive moment. They grabbed with excitement for any work, and each tried to outdo the rival. More and more often the woman began to think that it would be nice to have 2 daughters, but she has long forbidden herself to dream of personal female happiness, and when Alex visited them, the woman behaved deliberately strict. Cindy once spoke out about it. "Mom, you're funny to look at. You're trying to be such a snow queen, but you're not very good at it. If I were you, I'd take care of Dad, and you'd be fine, and Betty, and I would move to the capital." Mother was indignant. "You've already planned everything without my consent, and I don't want to go anywhere. You can leave your mom's plantation to someone else. That's what real businessmen do. And why don't you want, for example, to become the owner of a cosmetic salon or something else worth picking up?" Lucy only shrugged her shoulders because she was not ready to answer her daughter's question. Spring came, and the farmer eagerly started her favorite job. She got the seeds of an elite variety of lavender through a former classmate and decided to plant a few more varieties of flowering plants to try out. In the midst of the work, Cindy came running into the plantation. "Mom, throw everything. Uncle Alex is here. He needs you right away." The woman always rode her bicycle to the field. She quickly jumped on the two-wheeler and headed for the village. Alex impatiently paced around the yard. Seeing Lucy, he was overjoyed. "You have no idea what news I brought you, Alex. Only bearing in mind that I can't take all the news adequately, so it's better to be careful and from afar." "All right, have it your way. You told me you had experience working for a big company." "Yeah, my husband has a cosmetics company in Washington. Now you have a unique chance to become a sole proprietor of a similar enterprise. I'm told there's a bidding war in a couple days, and one of the bankrupt firms is going under the hammer. I think you should be interested. It's about time you went beyond your plantation, Lucy. Every endeavor needs to evolve. You're stuck on one rung." Lucy spent the whole night tossing and turning. She had long dreamed of owning something big and promising, but she was afraid. And now it was such a fortunate coincidence. Without waiting until morning, she dialed Alex's number. "And Betty can cook. If you let us, we can pick flowers and dry them." Lucy jokingly swung a towel at her daughter. "Get out of here, you little bitch." But to her surprise, Lucy soon came to the conclusion that Irina's presence has a positive effect on her daughter. In the relationship of the girls appeared even competitive moment. They grabbed with excitement for any work, and each tried to outdo the rival. More and more often the woman began to think that it would be nice to have two daughters, but she has long forbidden herself to dream of personal female happiness, and when Alex visited them, the woman behaved deliberately strict. Cindy once spoke out about it. "Mom, you're funny to look at. You're trying to be such a snow queen, but you're not very good at it. If I were you, I'd take care of Dad, and you'd be fine, and Betty, and I would move to the capital." Mother was indignant. "You've already planned everything without my consent, and I don't want to go anywhere. You can leave your mom's plantation to someone else. That's what real businessmen do. And why don't you want, for example, to become the owner of a cosmetic salon or something else worth picking up?" Lucy only shrugged her shoulders because she was not ready to answer her daughter's question. "Yeah, it's expensive, you can tell, but who would be surprised by expensive clothes nowadays?" Lucy grinned to herself. If the villagers found out how much money she had and how much she was going to pay for an unknown company, half of them would have had a heart attack, and the other half would have rushed to tear out the plantings in the vegetable garden to take up flowers. Lucy could not take her eyes off Alex's hands. He was turning the steering wheel. The cards and the muscles under his t-shirt were moving. She even got angry. She missed the male type. What more could she ask for? No more men in her life. They're nothing but trouble. Alex, of course, is not like that. So let him remain so good, caring, but just a friend. He suddenly turned to her. "Lucy, what are you mumbling about?" Lucy caught herself and was immediately confused. "Who am I?" Did he laugh? "No, unlike you know. When I was following you today, for some reason I remembered how you got your village all rattled, remember? And I had to lie that you were at home with me, and we were reading books." Lucy laughed. "Oh, come on. You haven't remembered for so many years that I'd almost forgotten. And here you are. It was so long ago, and it was such a long time ago that Lucy had almost forgotten it. It was because of the same grandmother, Helen, with whom she still had clashes. Helen had always had a very nasty temper, and her then cat Jack had the same temper. This Jack held all the village cats in fear and attacked people as well as a chain dog. Once when Lucy's cat, or rather grandparents, came again in battle wounds, Lucy got angry. But Gad, I'll arrange for you to be the kindest, to love everyone, and most importantly 24 hours to grandmother Helen songs to sing. Even then, Lucy was terribly fond of studying the properties of herbs. Of course, though Alex was older, but could not support her. They both didn't think it would have such an effect. For 2 days, Lucy prepared the potion. Alex only asked her if it would send the cat to the other side of the world. No, don't even worry. I didn't do him any harm. How can I explain it to you? It's like moonshine for our men always want always a little, and then fun. And then it's no more fun. As soon as it got dark, and it got dark close to midnight in the summer, the nights are short, Lucy and Alex quietly moved to the case. Alex guarded, and Lucy generously anointed outside the gate dough made by her liquid, and they immediately went home. In the morning, Lucy was awakened for the proper screams. She jumped out of bed and nestled against the window. The girl's eyes became huge at the gate. Helen, in one big circle, walked and shouted. That is, to put it in their language, cats and cats sang. The sight was strange, and from that very terrible. About 40 cats walking in one trajectory and singing. And the cats were singing, so it gave me goosebumps. There's a crowd of villagers standing nearby. People look at this picture with horror and quietly discuss when to wait for the end of the world. Every now and then one of the owners rushes out, grabbing her cat to carry it home. But the cat becomes real at that moment. Fury lashes out and rushes to the gate again. Helen's grandmother went sick because she was sure someone had put a curse on her. And Miranda probably did it, because she can. But Grandpa came up to people in the afternoon and Alex, Lucy, confess what you did. Lucy was ready to confess everything. But Alex said, no, Grandma Miranda, we sat up late at night at the books. And then Lucy went to bed. You saw that. It was the one and only time Lucy had ever fooled Grandma. The courtroom where the estate was being adjudicated was not crowded. Lucy and her companion wanted to take the empty seats, and at that moment someone called out to her, Lucy, what are you doing here? She turned around and turned pale. In front of her stood her ex-husband, but in this man there was nothing left of the self-righteous and arrogant egoist who almost broke her life. Alex watched the meeting of former spouses and did not know how to get out of his ticklish position. To relieve the tension, he reminded that it was time to take their seats, but Franklin couldn't budge. Lucy, you can rejoice, and I am a total bust. There will be a historic event in this room today. My firm, to which I have devoted half my life, will be sold for next to nothing. The man spoke with desperation and loudly, attracting the attention of those present. Lucy felt out of place. More than anything, she wanted to run away from this place. But Alex held her hand. You want me to show sympathy now? You know, I don't have any. You don't. Of course you do. You would have wanted a piece of it, too, and you didn't get it. Lucy suddenly realized how pathetic Franklin looked, like he wanted to get as much sleep as possible. Franklin, everything I need in life, I have. He looked at her with interest and only now noticed that his ex-wife looked pretty good. He could tell the difference between cheap clothes and good expensive ones, and the hair was styled to cut his wife's hair. Did they open a barber shop in that remote village? Franklin shifted his gaze to her companion. There was something familiar about him. I'd seen him somewhere before, but Franklin wasn't interested in him now. So you're saying you're having a great life, but Lucy picked up on it. But how is that possible when you threw me out on the street? Is that what you were going to ask? Franklin staggered back. He hadn't expected Lucy to say it so laudably and directly. But why would she? It was just the way things were. Franklin suddenly thought that, if he put his hand on his heart, Lucy's merit in their venture was, of course, enormous. The next thought made him remember. Lucy had loved him so much, and what if he were to make a quick castling change from Maria to Lucy? She'd pull like a real horse. She'd be able to think of something anyway. These thoughts so took possession of Franklin that he even missed the moment when he was demanded into the hall. He went to his seat and suddenly saw Maria in the hall and frowned. What had she come here for? And almost immediately heard that Maria had filed for divorce, and since she had worked for this company for many years, she was demanding financial compensation as a wife. So the wording was something like this: she worked for the good, and Franklin ruined everything by his unfortunate actions, and she and her son suffered. That seems like a lot of nonsense, except that for Franklin the nonsense was being discussed in all seriousness. He tried to spin his wife with a look, but she wouldn't even look at him. It turns out that if he got something out of the sale of the company, if he got anything out of the debts, it was from Maria. Franklin shifted his gaze to Lucy. That was it. Didn't have time to ask what she was doing here. Starting to complain about her failures, of course. And she's probably filing for some kind of compensation. After all, she did have a daughter with him. That's despicable, but he'll fight for every penny. The woman in the suit read out his debts at length. Franklin frowns angrily. He noticed that Lucy was taking notes and discussing something with a companion. He wonders why she's here, why she's rewriting his debts. There are two solutions to the problem. Firms completely disband all equipment, raw materials, and finished products are sold, and the proceeds go to pay off debts, or the firm is sold in its entirety, with the obligation to pay off all debts. Franklin was sure that the first option would be accepted. Then there would be enough not only for the debts, but also a little left for himself. By the way, it was Lucy who once insisted on buying high-quality, expensive equipment. She said that only such equipment could produce quality products. Even now, this equipment cost a lot of money. When Lucy raised her hand, Franklin looked at her with interest. Now everything would become clear. What he heard gave him a real shock. She is going to buy his firm, and with full repayment of debts at once. No, that can't be true. It's crazy. Where would she get that kind of money? He even stood up out of worry. He saw the way Maria was looking at him. Yeah, to hell with Marta. After the meeting, Franklin caught up with Lucy. I see you're settling in quite nicely. He cast a quick glance at Alex. Is there anyone who even keeps cows? Alex turned around in a second and smashed his fist into Franklin's nose. Then he took Lucy under his arm, and they went out to Franklin. Maria came up. You saw it. You saw it. Will you testify in court? Yes, of course I will. I saw you clinging to the chair. Maria left. Didn't even help him up. Franklin got up on his own and hurried away under the stares of those present. Cindy opened the gate and froze. Oh, when did you get back? And what is it that we smell so good? Alex's head appeared behind her. If I'm not mistaken, it's Dad's signature barbecue, and it is made on exceptional occasions. Alex laughed. You are like two purebred sheepdogs. You picked up the trail and followed the smell. The girls entered the courtyard. The table was almost set in the gazebo. They did not understand anything at all. From the house looked out Lucy at the broth and came. Come to my aid. The girls went into the house, not understanding anything. Ma, why don't you tell me what the big deal is? Betty slapped herself on the forehead. I think I know. Cindy looked at her suspiciously. Spit it out. Look, but it adds up. They went to town, then came back and set the table. They must have applied. Cindy shifted her suspicious gaze to her mother. Madam, we guessed right. Lucy blushed. Well, of course not. What kind of nonsense is going through your head? Take your plates and go outside. The girls ran off laughing, and Lucy took a breath. What had gotten her so worked up? Their assumption. That's ridiculous. She and Alex are good friends. And that's it. Guys, Enough talking. Everybody get to the table. Meat can't wait to be eaten hot. Everybody laughingly sat down in the gazebo, and Lucy raised her glass. What can I say now? I mean, it's gonna be short. And then, if you, Cindy, want to hear the details, I'll answer all your questions. Today I bought the firm I once founded. But then Franklin, my ex-husband, decided he should own it. The firm is in terrible shape. It's broke, but it has a brand, which is now shaken. There's equipment, production. I want to raise a glass to the fact that it will prosper again soon. Cindy and Betty, who had been listening with their mouths open to what Lucy was saying, drank their juice machiniatically. And Cindy finally exhaled. The truth about what? The truth, daughter. But it's also true that we're going to have to travel back and forth. And I honestly don't know how to deal with it yet. Cindy looked up at her mother. What's the name of the firm? It's a pretty good sounding name. Franklin Beauty. But I think we should rename it. We don't want someone else's laurels, even though they're not there anymore. Cindy was under some stress. She hardly spoke at all. And when the guests had left and she and her mother had put away all the dishes, her daughter sat down in front of her. Mom, it seems to me that you are now quite old enough to know everything that happened with you and your father. Lucy sighed, sat down across from her and said, I guess you're right. I'm going to tell you everything now. Just don't think I want to deliberately smear my father, whatever he was. He's your father. I always wanted you two to communicate. But alas and Franklin was up all night. He was thinking. His brain had always been an adventurous one, and now it was going to take a lot of twisting to get it right. In the evening, he made inquiries about his ex-wife and scolded himself for not having done it earlier. It turns out that while he thought that his wife was a milkmaid, so as not to starve to death, Lucy was doing very well. Not just not bad, you could say it was great. He didn't make a big deal about it, but he was told she had a lot of momentum. Now, of course, it's gonna be very hard to get out of it, because she'll think he's after her money. But there is one very good idea. It's Cindy's idea. He could melt a daughter's heart, that's for sure. And clearly the girl was missing him. And Lucy had never been the type to turn a child against him. So Cindy was the place to start. I wish I could remember how old she is. Better yet, find out what she's into. All right, then. Where the hell have we been? He'll think of something, won't he? As morning came, Franklin left the house. Cindy woke up and stretched sweetly. How good was that? They had such a talk with Mom yesterday. Cindy realized that Lucy really didn't mean to denigrate her father, but that's how her daddy turned out to be. Honestly, she wanted to look at him, to talk to him. I wondered if he felt anything for her as a daughter or not. Somehow Cindy felt like he didn't. But to be sure, to put a final end to this tale, she wanted to. Cindy, but are you asleep? Are you still awake? Betty's head came through the window. I'm asleep. What's wrong? No, come on. I'm going fishing with the bonefish today. You were dying to go. Cindy jumped out of bed, with Bones. How could she forget that? Yeah, Martin's the hottest guy in school. All the girls are chasing him. And he invited her to go fishing. All they had to do was figure out who he was more interested in, her or Betty. Cindy was determined if it was Betty, she'd step right into the shadows, out of the way of her friends. Betty decided the same. Although, to be honest, she didn't like Martin at all. He was too handsome, as if he wasn't real. And he invited her to go fishing as if he was doing a favor for a happy little girl. So Betty agreed. 10 minutes later, they were at the river. Damn, I forgot to leave my mom a note. Betty looked at Martin. We won't be long. He nodded in agreement. Surprisingly, Martin talked. He didn't sit there with a strange look, as he usually did at school. He turned out to be a very cheerful, simple guy. Betty and Cindy, they'd long since forgotten about fishing. They were laughing, holding their stomachs, and Martin was making up new stories. We were very interested. Martin looked at them with regret. Let's sit by the river in the evening. Polly smiled. Let's. Betty wanted to refuse, but Cindy gave her a look that said there was nothing left to do. How could I say yes? Cindy, the girls, and Martin turned around. There was a man standing not far from them, and looking at Cindy with a kind of pleading look. At me, she was a little confused. She'd never seen him before. And then her mind began to clear. You, Frank? No, wrong. I'm your daddy. Martin and Betty looked at Cindy in amazement, and she immediately calmed down. No, that's where you're wrong. Daddy's usually around children, and you're around me. I don't remember that. Franklin got a little off track and decided to get right to the main part. Cindy will definitely talk about everything. Your mom must have given you the wrong information. I just couldn't be around for reasons beyond my control. Look what I brought you. Franklin walked quickly to the car and pulled out a laptop computer. The money was a pity, of course, but he needed to impress Cindy. He realized perfectly well that a country girl, albeit a wealthy one, couldn't have such a thing. In fact, to be honest, he had expected to see a very rustic kitchen. But in front of him stood a quite fashionable, beautiful girl. Thank you very much. But I have a laptop much more powerful than this. Franklin shrieked with the teeth of a grave. You could have kept your mouth shut. Cindy was silent. Franklin was silent. Looks like this isn't going to be as easy as he thought. He finally got it out of his system. But how do you live, my daughter? Cindy sighed. I guess I'll have to go through this ordeal to the end. Okay, Martin and Betty nodded their heads in agreement for now. Of course, she would have to talk to her daddy, whom she hadn't seen in so many years. Franklin left the car by the river, and she and Cindy walked toward the houses. As luck would have it, they ran into Helen's grandmother. She stopped and gave them an attentive look. She thought for a long time what kind of a man she had already seen and finally remembered grandmother, and Helen picked up everything, rushed to the place where Lucy had Cindy, and she is there and knows nothing. Lucy. Lucy pulled herself away from the papers. Now her head was busy with how to make everything enough for the customers and for her own firm. It would be very profitable. Seeing her grandmother, Helen wrinkled her nose and walked towards her. But what's wrong, Helen? You're here while you're in your herbs. Elkin's daddy's here. He's already taken her somewhere. Oh, lucky girl. And you wouldn't know it. Lucy's heart almost stopped. She knew very well how beautifully Franklin could sing his speeches. They could confuse anyone. You're not confused, Helen, are you? No, my memory's still good. Lucy didn't say another word. She jumped on her bike and rode off into the village. I came home like a fury, ready to tear Franklin apart right now. Cindy was lying on the bed reading a book. Lucy took a breath. Where's Daddy? I sent him home. For some reason, he thought we were very happy to have him back. Mom, what's wrong with you? Why are you so pale? Lucy waved her hand and suddenly cried. Cindy immediately jumped up and hugged her. What did you think? Did you think I'd take it? No, Mommy, you're the best. And remember, it wasn't just you he chased away, it was me too. Lucy was standing in the middle of the hall. Next to her was Cindy. Here's my daughter. I used to design everything here. Cindy looked at it with delight. When I learn, I'll come and work for you. Will you take me? Lucy laughed. Well, of course, the firm was empty now. All employees were sent on vacation for an unknown amount of time. Do you want me to give you a job now? Of course I do. What kind of job? We'll find all the employees' cell phones, and you'll call them, invite them to a meeting. Like tomorrow, 3:00 p.m. Cindy even clapped his hands. Oh, that's great. Like your real assistant. Exactly from behind, slapped like that. Lucy turned around sharply. Two people came through the door and stopped. It was Maria, her son Kevin. Hello. I was walking by. I see the door open. I realized you were here. Maria looked tired. Actually, she was. She'd been looking for work for 2 weeks without success. No one wanted to take in a wife, even an ex-wife. A man who'd screwed up his own big firm. Excuse me, Lucy, I know this is probably a silly thing to say, But would your firm have a job for me? You see, basically, it's just like you said it would be. Lucy, who a moment ago had been ready to throw the woman out, sighed. Oh, what fools we all are. Cindy walked over to him. Hi. He looked at her with clear eyes. Hi. So it turns out you're my brother. He nodded. It's working. Why are you standing there like you're not my own? Let's give each other a hug. At that moment, Lucy held back her tears with great difficulty. No matter how willful, she's real. And she has a heart too. 3 months have passed. Well, my dears, we have signed very large, lucrative contracts, or rather there are several, but the work will go in the same direction. We can be congratulated for the new year. In addition to the salary, I promise to give a good bonus. People in the hall murmured approvingly. Many people returned to work. All those who once knew Lucy without a second thought. Those who were younger after the interview with her were those who had already found another job. But those two were slowly pulling up. Maria sat next to her. They had once worked at the same place, and now Maria was helping her a lot. It had been so many years. The market has changed a lot. Today we can celebrate a real victory. The thaw, Lucy could safely say they'd gone up. Cindy was often at her work too, often staying up late with her, absorbing and studying everything her mother did. So today at the meeting, she sat in the front row. They went outside and got in the car. Shall we go home? Cindy nodded in agreement. A little over a month ago, she and her mother had bought a very successful apartment. Mom, have you talked to Uncle Alex for a long time? Yes, a long time. Why doesn't he call? But Lucy will not tell her that almost every night grabbed the phone to dial him, and then put it off, afraid that she would violate his privacy. If he doesn't call himself, there's no reason to. Mom, that's not right. You know how Uncle Alex feels about you, don't you? Lucy looked at her daughter with a smile. How did she grow up? How? Well, Mom, you understand. Yeah. Lucy smiled sadly. You see, Cindy, if he had been interested in me, he would have at least called. Now, Mom, you're not acting right. Why? It's very simple. You don't need his help right now. You're doing fine. So he pulled away to get out of the way. Lucy suddenly hit the brakes. You think so? I'm sure. You think about it. Think about something. Lucy now realized that Alex was always there for her. When she needed his help, he'd drop everything and rush to her. And now that she's doing great, she hasn't even called him. She should call him. Cindy held up her mom's hand, which reached for the phone. No, I have a better idea. It's Uncle Alex's birthday today, she told me. But he'll be back from work in 2 hours. Of course, he's not going to celebrate his birthday. Lucy smiled at Cindy, and in someone so smart, called Betty. You and I are going to the mall. Cindy laughed. Now I recognize you. Otherwise nothing makes you happy. Lucy smiled lately. It was true. Even the successes of the firm did not make her as happy as the upcoming meetings with Alex. Alex had parked the car. She should have at least bought a cake. Betty had obviously prepared some kind of gift. He looked at his watch, and it was a few blocks to the nearest supermarket, which was still working. Okay, his daughter was grown up and wouldn't take offense. He closed the car and moved toward the house, opened the house. Strange, so quiet and no daughter to greet him. He walked into the big room and turned on the light. The air flew streamers from the clapper. Alex even sat down from fright. And then he saw Lucy. You, and she came over. Why did you keep it a secret? That it's your birthday. He smiled confusedly. I didn't think you'd be interested. Well, I was wrong. I'm interested in everything to do with you. He looked at her incredulously. You are? Of course I am. How are you? They stood in the middle of the gamut the girls had set up, and it was as if they hadn't heard or seen anything, neither the noise nor the foil glitter falling on them. Lucy thought she missed her terribly, and Alex wondered why he hadn't confessed his feelings to her sooner. Why had he waited until she was the owner of a successful business? The evening went well. Cindy stayed the night at Ira's, and Alex volunteered to escort Lucy. "Yeah, I'll take a cab to get there just fine. I'm not arguing with you. I'll walk you all the way to the door." They rode in the cab holding hands like schoolchildren. We didn't say a word the whole way. When they got to her door and Lucy opened it, they didn't agree on anything. Together, they went inside. Franklin only got the back of the car into the gate the third time. How angry was he? How did he hate the whole world? He's Franklin, supposed to be delivering equipment and accessories for the holidays. But that's all right. He'll be patient for a while. And then he's bound to come up with something profitable. Yes, he had money left. Not much, but enough to live on for now to avoid such a humiliating job. But he relied on his intuition and decided to play the stock market. Now he had no money for anything at all. And if he didn't go to work, there would be trouble waiting for him. These two souls he could not find in any way on offensive words for ex-wives. They filed for alimony all at once. He got an astronomical amount of money, and it was very unpleasant. Neither one would talk to him. And then he found out that Maria worked for Lucy, and he just had to accept it. He stopped the car and opened the door. "Who's unloading?" "Franklin." He turned around in surprise. Lucy was unrecognizable. She had lost a little weight. Plus, she was wearing a very well-tailored suit. All in all, she looked amazing. Have you decided to open a holiday introduction business too?" She smiled confusedly. "No, it's my holiday. And it's here to prepare properly for the wedding, for my wedding. No movers, by the way. It should be in your contract." She went to the man who was hurrying towards her along the path. Franklin immediately recognized the man who had accompanied her to the courthouse. Then came the realization of how he knew him. Sure enough, it was the man from the ministry. He had crossed paths with him a couple of times when he was still on the horse. Franklin kicked the door with all his might. What on earth was this? Why? A single word boomeranged in his head. Pain shot through his leg, and he almost screamed, but there was nothing to do. He got the hell out of there and started unloading the car. "Mom, can I invite Martin to your wedding?" Lucy pretended to try to figure out who Martin was. "Mom, you know him very well. You're serious with him." Cindy blushed. "Mom, he's just my friend." Lucy smiled. "It's nice to have a friend in your life, especially if he is a little bit like Uncle Alex." Subscribe and click the bell. After graduating from high school with honors, having won several state biology competitions, Miranda decided to enter the best university in the country to study psychiatry. Her father was completely supportive, and everything else. He was a gutless, weak, and left-handed man, incapable of making any decisions. When he was fired from a job he had worked half his life at, he was not at all upset, but simply went to work for the same company, only in the lowest position, because that was all he had to do. And he had no desire to fight for his future. Miranda had to pull the family down on himself since childhood. His father couldn't make decisions like whether to take a phone on credit or to save up the full amount to pay it off at once, so he left the decision to his 10-year-old daughter. At first she was flipping a coin to decide what she should do. But soon she realized it was impractical and started drawing tables from the column, pros and cons. Learning to make choices as early as 13, she was telling her father what he should do. And it was as if she was replacing the role of wife or mother in his life. Miranda had to learn to take responsibility not only for herself, but for the whole family, which, however, consisted of only 2 people. Her mother, Joan, when Miranda was 8 years old, went on watch in Alaska, where geographers set up a base, going on a scientific expedition. Joan had to help them with household things, cleaning, cooking meals, doing their laundry. Heartily, after saying goodbye to her family, she left and was due back in a few months. But no one ever saw her again, anywhere. Miranda received a letter from the sponsors of this scientific expedition that her mother had gone for a morning walk one day. Having performed her routine duties, she was calm at peace, with life boiling inside her, and nothing to portend trouble. But as soon as she left, there was no further news of her. Miranda's father, already accustomed to his wife's constant departures, was not worried when he saw her off once again. But when the news came that his beloved wife was incarcerated, his heart was missing. It broke just at that moment, the metaphorical section of the brain that was responsible for the will ceased to function and eventually completely vaporized. It was as if the will had been cut out of him. You could say that it began a process of decaying personality decomposition that was merciless and unstoppable, a disease for which mankind had not yet devised a cure. Miranda herself had always taken her mother's departures painfully. It was as if each time a piece of her soul was stolen from her, a piece that always came back. But this time, when she received that fateful letter, Miranda realized that a part of her soul in the warmest, most valuable, most important, no one would ever give it back to her. What was surprising was that she didn't cry, looking questioningly at her father, as if subconsciously wanting to understand the right reaction or not. She saw that he was looking at the letter with a stone face, in which it was impossible to read the feelings. So she decided that the absence of her tears was normal. There are never right or wrong reactions in such cases, and after all, everyone reacts differently to grief. However, if one looked deep into Miranda's mind, it would become clear she did not cry at all. Not because any emotional expressions were missing because of the shock, but because there was no shock at all. Every time she drifted off deep into consciousness, Miranda realized that her mother might not return. This letter was not news to her. Her mom's disappearance formed the basis of her identity because it happened at the very peak of her formation. It formed the foundation on which all subsequent beliefs were built, not to be close to anyone, not to love anyone. Attachment only causes pain. Only career is important in life. One should only take care of oneself. You can't rely on anyone. These beliefs became her dogmas, sacred thoughts that she followed in every incomprehensible situation. She had no friends. She never went out with anyone. She repressed all feelings. If she could fall in love with someone, she immediately nipped it in the bud, not allowing the feelings to develop. This helped her to achieve great success in life. After all, she lived not only in the era of capitalism, and therefore in the era of selfishness, but also in the most developed capitalist country, where the personal interests of the individual were put above the interests of society. The whole system in which she lived encouraged her selfishness and alienation from people. From what did all this develop in her with redoubled vigor? Nothing existed in her life but herself and her studies. She didn't go out. She didn't rest, turning herself into a robot to perform the tasks assigned to her, to do her homework, to get the highest score, to win at the Olympics, to graduate with honors, to enter the best university. This is how she lived to the days from which the main events of this story begin. Entering a prestigious university as a psychiatrist, she studied there for 2 years before they started her internship. The internship was at the Central State Psychiatric Hospital, which was both a mental health center where they locked up particularly dangerous lunatics, treated the mentally ill, and helped with nervous system problems. It was a prison and a treatment center in one person. There were several centimeters of snow on the roads, which made driving very difficult. And on the first day, Miranda got to the hospital instead of the planned 40 minutes, 3 o'clock. It was snowing in hail, creating a blanket of snow in front of her eyes, which prevented her from seeing properly, and she missed several of her stops. The buses were crowded. There was an atmosphere of anger and tension in the air, which only fueled every passenger that was late for something. The driver honked so loudly she could hear it. Honking through vacuum headphones, screamed infants, and pushed herself off the bus. Miranda was finally on the outside and walked calmly to the hospital. She almost slipped a few times on the thick ice. The main building was of the old construction seen everywhere in the mid-20th century. Concrete walls with a fine stone facade flat roof, 3 stories and a visor in front of the entrance. that sheltered a large metal door that gave the feeling of entering a bunker or some extreme protected place. Passing through the guard at the entrance that sat in front of a small desk that looked like a school desk. And the opposite happened through the queue at the reception desk, which stretched across the whole hall and went to the exit she needed in the courtyard. Left turn, right turn behind the gate, around the corner. Down the stairs, a new turn. The layout of the building was like the layout of a labyrinth, so easily one could get lost in the endless corridors and offices. Miranda noticed an amazing property of the hospital from the outside. It seemed several times smaller than the inside, which further emphasized the overall irregularity and illogicality of the building. Passing through the couloirs, she finally made her way to the backyard. A wide paved road led her through an endless amount of construction and other buildings with unknown contents. A large playground opened up to her. What was in the cage was behind a metal 4-meter fence with barbed wire on top of it. Inside, a group of children were playing ball. She couldn't stop and take a closer look at them for 2 reasons. She was running late, and the children's probation officer. As soon as she noticed the curious gaze, Miranda immediately gestured sternly for her to go on about her business. Older women in work jackets were shoveling snow and throwing out trash. Passing through a narrow opening between the buildings, she found herself in front of a 5-story building that had obviously been built recently. But she didn't notice any significant differences, except for the clean and neat facades. Once inside, she found herself in a small room, from which she could either enter another maze of corridors or go up the stairs, which she did, climbing to the 3rd floor. She saw a thick metal door that was locked. She knocked, and one of the nurses opened it, looking through the peephole. The door was locked and had a big chain that couldn't be broken. The nurse, like everyone else here, was dressed in a blue suit, slippers, pants, and a t-shirt. Miranda stepped inside. In front of her was a large, cheap table that served as the watch of this ward, behind which sat her fellow student. Together with her, they were interning here. To the right down the corridor were the wards. To the left there were also wards, but in addition to that you could get to the office of the head of the ward and to the canteen. A fellow student, Grace, told Miranda she had to go to the supervisor's office. Grace was a nice girl, and despite all her prejudices about the people she lived with, treated her well, and to some extent even sympathized with her. She also studied well, was purposeful, strong-willed, and initiative. That is, she possessed all the qualities Miranda valued. It was difficult to call them friends because they had never even gone anywhere together. And they were not strangers either. There was only one major difference between them. Grace loved people. Miranda walked down the corridor. There were cameras everywhere, that like the eye of God were watching everything that was going on. A sense of paranoia, a haunting constant surveillance, like paranoid schizophrenia, born in Miranda's soul. Surveillance, surveillance, surveillance. Everywhere you go there's surveillance. That's how people go crazy. But I guess it's for the good of the patients. The camera feed was on the TV in reception, but it didn't look like anyone cared. Everyone was busy with themselves and their phones. If a patient wanted to do something to himself or other patients, how would they know about it if no one looked at the cameras? What kind of attitude is that? Sneaking glimpses past the ward doors. Miranda tried to pass them quickly and quietly, but at the same time I peered into each one. The wards were small, but there was enough space to fit 4 beds, a closet, and small nightstands adjacent to each bunk. On the far wall was a window with bars and blinds, so that the patients could lower them themselves. There were no handles to the windows. They had been taken out and hidden, so no one but the nurses could open the windows. And as Miranda found out later, it was not even possible to open the window completely. All the patients were asleep. It was now quiet hour. Some, especially the violent ones, were tied to the bed with thick ropes and were not allowed to move their legs and arms. The nurse Mitya walked back and forth along the corridor to see if everyone was asleep, because it was considered that daytime sleep was very important for the patients and their recovery. Through the windows on the right side of the corridor, we could see the courtyard of the building, which was ring-shaped. There was a dome over the courtyard, and the courtyard itself served as a winter garden that was constantly monitored and cared for. There were benches placed there, flowers growing, and small trees planted in the windows on the other side. Miranda saw patients walking there, one of them an elderly man just standing there in a stupor looking at this winter garden, not moving at all. A nurse came up to him and gently, even, Miranda thought, somewhat demurely escorted him to his room. On the lower floor was the psychoethical ward. There were mostly elderly people there with their respective problems, and young people who were most likely to be there because of the military enlistment, because anyone with any mental problems had to spend a month there for evaluation. But as Miranda was told, there was no examination at all, and the teenagers just lived there for a month in absolute idleness, without the possibility to go outside the hospital. It was only on the last day that they had a conversation with a professor who gave his verdict supposedly based on observations. What did the nurses do in a month regarding the patient in the Miranda ward? It was different. Here all patients went around in special brown, green, striped uniforms. You couldn't use phones or any technology at all. Go outside. Go for walks. No one was allowed to visit them, and all parcels were strictly searched. It was strictly forbidden to bring in coffee or even sodas, or anything that tasted good at all. It was for the good of the patients, because given the drugs they were taking, there were many things they couldn't have. Why weren't the patients on this ward allowed to visit? What is this nonsense? Are they not human beings and don't need simple human communication with their families? Surely there must be a logical explanation for this, which Miranda would find out later. After all, she sincerely believed in the rightness of justice, logic, and honesty of the healthcare and system. After all, she didn't become a psychiatrist for nothing. I knocked on the door. She went into the superintendent's office, which was very different from the other rooms in the place. 2 oak desks where the superintendent and her assistant sat, 2 black leather couches for visitors, many different abstract paintings, shelves overflowing with documents and computers. Miranda noticed the painting that hung behind the superintendent's desk. It depicted a metaphysical portrait made up of nothing but sharp angles, making it seem harsh, rough, unsettling, and unpleasant to the eye. The portrait was done in a black and white graphic style, filled with patterns as angular as himself. There were so many patterns that they turned to mush and did not form an overall coherent composition. What could have conveyed any meaning? Unless absolute ugliness, chaos, and lack of integrity and ugliness were considered meaning. Stakeholder. I was sitting at my desk reading something on my computer. She was a blonde woman. Miranda wouldn't have pegged it over 40. She wore the same uniform as the nurses, only it was white, which went well with the color of her hair. On her eyes were fancy glasses of the type worn by most of the students at Miranda University. She was slender with a good figure like a porcelain figurine and full breasts. Her eyes were open. Her lips were plump and her skin was as white and fair as the moon in every sense. It was a beautiful woman. What is that painting on your wall? Miranda asked after the greeting, pointing to the portrait. This was painted for me by one of my past patients. What was lying here? It's a metaphysical portrait of me. I like it very much. Miranda decided to refrain from expressing her opinion and only tried to smile kindly. But it was as crooked as the portrait itself. My name is Lisa, and for the next few months you will be working here with me as your internship. And at the end of it, I will write my report on your work and your qualifications to your supervisor at the university. Your name must be Miranda. That's correct. You can familiarize me with what's going on here. Nothing out of the ordinary. I envy the psychiatric wards for the seriously ill. You can see the daily schedule in the hallway at the front desk. The nurses will tell you when and how many pills to give out. During quiet hours, you should make sure that no one leaves their rooms. No one is allowed outside. If you have any questions for me, I'm always happy to help. I take care of my patients and make sure they're doing well. That means diet, stable medication, And most importantly, the same routine. Any patient needs a stable and predictable routine, especially the mentally ill. Please take that into consideration. Although I'm sure you already know that, I will ask the assistant to show you around and introduce you to everyone. A few minutes later, Miranda was already walking with the young assistant and Veronica, who explained everything to her. They walked through all the wards on the floor where only men were lying down. On the face of it, if you didn't look closely, they were the most ordinary men, except that their gaze was aloof, empty, lost, as if a non-drinker had gotten very drunk for the first time. Miranda knew what drugs were given here and understood perfectly well what effect they would have, but she'd never experienced it personally, and it puzzled her, if not shocked her. Poor people are like prisoners here, but on the other hand, prisons don't cure people, they cripple them. Unlike psychiatric hospitals, yes, there's a ward for mentally ill criminals, although Miranda didn't understand the point of their existence. After all, any criminal, in fact, is already mentally ill with serious mental disabilities. But she didn't work in one. All of the man's patients were calm. Miranda thought that they were not violent themselves and that there were some other wards for the violent. She didn't know that she was in just such a ward. And just before quiet time, people were dosed with strong doses of sleep medication. They went up to the 4th floor, which was no different from the previous one, and walked through the women's wards, which smelled a little better. She noticed that all the patients were very dirty. Their hair smelled greasy. Then the clothes smell of power, as if she'd been transported back to her high school days. She was locked in the men's locker room again by her classmates. Veronica answered her that the patients wash once a week. Why not more? She doesn't know that. The utility bills would probably be prohibitive in that case, and their hospital budgets aren't that big. What's at the other end of the hallway? Miranda pointed to the opposite end of the hallway from the dining room. There are private rooms. The patient's family or the patient can pay for a private room if they don't want to live with someone else. There's a separate shower that runs 3 times a week separately, and a toilet, a TV, a better bed, and a desk. But isn't socialization the key factor? The recovery of the mentally ill, especially a seriously ill person? Well, I don't know. That's not for me to ask. Veronica's starting to brush it off. Often patients don't have the money to live there anyway, and their families don't care about them, so they can't pay for them. We usually put the most violent ones in there, who won't let their roommate sleep, for example, or otherwise interferes with their peace of mind. So you isolate the violent ones. To do what? To make them more socially withdrawn. That's not a question for me. Veronica hesitated. Please don't ask me questions I can't answer. It annoys me. I'm sorry, who lives in these wards now? I turned my attention to her words, Miranda. No one, as far as I know. No, there's a woman who's the heaviest patient I've had in the whole time I've been working here. She's been here before me for who knows how many years. You don't have to worry about her. She's being handled by a separate, specially trained nurse. The news of the mysterious patient certainly interested Miranda, but not enough for her to do anything about it. By the time they'd gotten around to it, the quiet hour was over. She realized this because someone started banging on someone's bed very loudly with an iron stick. A frightened man came running in. She saw that it was one of the orderlies, a sturdy man about 30 years old in reddish and uniform. Miranda tried to stop him, but he pushed her away roughly. For a moment, there was a look of bewilderment on his face, which quickly changed to anger. Then he poked something and walked away. What are you doing? Grace ran up to her. I mean, what does that look like to you? Sabotage. Sabotage. Miranda smiled ironically. You can't break the rules here, but it's an atrocity. How can you treat people like that? She almost shrieked with indignation. They're not people. They're severely mentally ill. There's nothing human left in them. Believe me, I've seen that in the time I've been working here without you, after handing out the pills to everyone. Miranda calmly sat down on the watch and dived into the abyss of her thoughts about this place. Her eye suddenly fell on the television with cameras, where she saw that one of the male patients had covered himself head to toe with a blanket, thereby as if leading a fortress around him, and doing something under it, as it was constantly moving, picking something out of it. Just in case, she decided to quickly run and check what he was doing. There was no one in his room because everyone had left for dinner. He sat there alone, protected, impregnable by the walls of the fortress, which Miranda had to storm just to get that blanket off him. When she finally did, a guy in his mid-20s, huddled in the corner of his bed, knees drawn up to his chest, head covered, ready to strike. Distraught at this unexpected reaction, Miranda looked at the bed and saw that the guy was drawing a portrait with a pencil. It was her portrait. How accurate, how sensual, how graceful. She hadn't realized she was so beautiful. The careful curves of her face, the barely visible cheekbones, the lips that are as if on red roses, the eyelashes like waves that are visible from the seashore, and the eyes, like a whole landscape of the soul. How beautiful, how could he have had time to paint this in less than a day that it is here? And most importantly, than with this pathetic, simple school pencil, or rather even its stump without a rubber band. Unbelievable. What's going on here? A rough man's voice came from behind me. It was the man who was banging on the bed. Pencil. Drawing is not allowed. He howled. Immediately his howl was met by the underground men, the helpers, and all together, they started beating the poor guy, gagging him with their clubs. A blow, a second blow. The third blow hit him in the head. The guy crawled off the bed, curled up and covered his head, and started screaming in a way Miranda had never heard before. This pathetic, insignificant thing. And from that in her heart, like needles, the shriek pierced through it. She was in so much pain that she could not even move, but only silently watched the process that in a flash promised the workers of this hospital. Her aloofness, coldness, some arrogance, indifference evaporated in an instant, changed by simple, natural, living, human compassion. Her heart opened like a bud on a tree. It blossomed and bloomed in the spring at the most terrible, ghastly, and inopportune moment, leaving behind a deep cut. Blow, 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 everything repeated. They didn't stop. The boy didn't fight back. He just yelped like an angry cat being attacked by a dog. Finally, they stopped, threw him on the bed, tied him up, took his pencil drawing, and went to the superintendent's office. Miranda waited until they came out and went into the office. During this time, her fear and compassion were replaced by hatred and anger. "What do you think you're doing?" From the threshold she yelled. "And you about the drawing?" asked Lisa calmly, adjusting the keyboard on the desk. "Well, what did you want?" Pencils and paper are not to be used by patients in the heavy ward without the supervision of doctors or other staff. It is for their own good, because with a pencil they can hurt not only themselves, but also the people around them who share their woes. And with the help of paper they can start a fire, which has already happened, because of which we had to lock up one of these violent and especially dangerous patients in a separate ward, which are actually intended for those who can buy it. And she lives there for free. We don't do anything to harm our patients. We do everything for their own good. She spoke aloofly and as if to herself. But even in prison, the conditions are better. Miranda boiled up. "We are all kind of imprisoned sick people here. The nurses, my assistant, and even myself, we are all prisoners of this place. We're attached to it. Yes, in a normal prison, the conditions might be better. But this is a special prison for special people. It's you prisoners who pray here every day, go to the hairdresser, get your hair styled, get your nails done. You sleep in a soft bed in the warmth of your own home. You see your husband and children, if you have them. Eat normal food. Go out with your girlfriends. You're the one who's a prisoner here. Listen, girl." She stood up, walked over to Miranda, and looked her in the eyes almost point blank. Her always simple and so carefree expression changed abruptly to grim, cold, stern. Her speech became harsher. "Either you do your long internship on my terms, or you're out. From there, you get the most paltry report of your work. Whatever I can come up with, I see. Palms went cold. A lump appeared in his throat that you couldn't with a glob of dagger. Took a step back, and then almost ran out of the office, slamming the door. Standing in front of the office was a rat who had come running in here immediately when he heard some noise and had overheard the conversation from the beginning. "What are you doing? You're out of your mind. Are you trying to get out?" Her motherly mentor turned on her, a tone Miranda couldn't stand. She hated to be bossed around and told what to do. And yet she herself wasn't far behind, straying from her will. She tried to push her away, but she got in her way. I personally saw a patient slash his veins with a pen not like a light bulb. They started a fire when they set a blanket on fire. Think of what they can do with pencil and paper. It's all done for their own good and our peace of mind. Don't fight back against it. And don't try to improve what is already working. You as a woman should understand that, shouldn't you? You could hear the tone in her, the kind of tone one hears in deeply religious people who make up an atheist. To be fair, Miranda did note that all the lamps in the building were behind bars and thick glass. It was just so hard to get them out. Maybe all these inhumane atrocities are really being done for good. "Come on, I'll show you something," Grace said. They went outside, went behind a building and came to a small 2-story structure that looked like the main hospital building. There were bars on all the windows, even on the first floor. The space between the bars that had them was so small that you could barely put your hand through them. A deafening shriek from within reached their ears, turning over all their insides, mixing them into mush. A helpless, unnatural, a wild animal howl, like that of an animal being chased by wolves. It was so strange that it seemed like it wasn't a sound at all, but a living entity with no physical shell that crept through bars and walls, that climbed the 2 girls and anyone else who heard it right into their souls. It affected Miranda so much that she covered her ears. But it was as if it even made him louder. "What's in here?" Miranda asked, trying to shout over the screams. "The children's ward, an orphanage for mentally ill children. If you're under 18, but you suddenly get childhood depression, they put you in here. If you're violent, or if you're hyper-aggressive, you're violent. Believe me, kids can do a lot of things. Sometimes they can be even scarier than adults. They're gonna put you in here too. So this is where they put the violent and the non-violent." That's right. I don't think it's right. And it shouldn't be the case that the difficult patients are put in with the normal ones. But what we have is what we have. These children are often not even wanted by their parents. They are completely derelict, and only these walls can shelter them and even help them somehow. Of course, not everything here is perfect, but where can we see this very ideal? Everything is in the process of becoming, and this place is no exception. Through the bars on the windows, the interior of the rooms was slightly visible, painted with flowers, walls, scattered toys, fluffy carpets, and soft sofas. As soon as the children saw that they were being looked at through the window, they immediately ran up and started beckoning the girls to stay back. We are strictly forbidden to have contact with them. Trying to stop Miranda Gray, but it was too late. Little hands reached through the bars. Miranda immediately noticed one boy. He was like a prince. His eyes were as if they were holy. He was all affectionate, velvet, silk, pure, the embodiment of absolute goodness and light. I wanted to hug him, to soak in his bright and pure energy, to recharge and share it with other people, that he was as fluffy as a soft toy bear. The boy has forgotten what his life put the boy here for. "Why are you here?" Intoxicated by the mindfulness, she asked. "I have ADHD, is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. My parents put me here for treatment. But is ADHD such a danger to society that you would isolate children from the outside world on the pretext of treatment? Something's wrong here. You're allowed to go out. No, only with the doctor. We go into a cage with a playground inside and play there for half an hour a day. We can't go out anymore. We don't have cell phones either. We can't call our parents or talk to anyone. We can't visit us either. What is this? What did the children do to deserve this fate? Does the fact that they have some kind of mental problem deserve to be isolated from society and, in fact, imprisoned? Why is this world so cruel to them? Let's go. We're not allowed to talk to them. Grace was worried. Wait. A girl's voice was heard, gathering through the crowd near the window. A girl about 11 years old found herself in front of Miranda. Only a barrier of bars separated them. As soon as Miranda saw her, she turned pale. It was hard to describe what frightened her so much. It seemed to her as if this girl had stepped out of the pages of Dostoevsky's novels. A girl mentally unhealthy with consumption and a fracture in her soul, which was vividly reflected in the character's gaze. Except it wasn't a character, it was a real person. She had never seen anything like it before. A sharp, bold, and extremely nervous look. It was as if every nerve in her nervous system was inflamed to the point where she could feel her own hair growing. Her movements were abrupt, as if two sharp knives were passing over each other's blade and forming sparks to catch the eyes of everyone watching her. Unwittingly interacting with her, even just being near her, you succumbed to her nervousness and became restless yourself. It was as if you began to worry about the movement of planets around the solar system, the movement of galaxies around other galaxies, the movement of all galaxies around the centers of the universe. You understood the inevitable collapse of the universe, felt with all your soul the inevitable end that was approaching at the speed of light. And from this you fell into a terrible nervousness with contempt, looking at people who did not understand it, and himself with his whole body, realizing the perishability and inevitable end of life. Give me your cell phone right now. I need to call my parents right away. They don't know I'm here. They're probably looking for me by now. I just need to tell them where I am. Give me your phone quickly and clearly, she said, like she was giving instructions to her subordinates. Girl, what's wrong with you? Why are you sitting here? What did you get in here for? Miranda still couldn't move away from her impression. Just give me your phone. What is this here? What department are you from? Girl heard a voice behind the back of the crowd of guys. Quickly answer, where are you from? Do you have any idea what crime you are committing? The voice of the warden sounded from all sides. Let's run, Grace said, leaving Miranda behind her. You've had it. I warned you, she said as they entered the ward. Those kids have even been walking around in that boy's cage since he was 9 years old. Does he deserve to be in that prison? It's literally a prison. Although even in prisons, inmates are allowed to communicate with their families sometimes. I showed you these poor children not so that you could empathize with them and become disillusioned with the system, but so that you could understand that these are not children. These are evil entities that hide under the guise of children. They are liars, marginalized, and potential murderers. You think that boy, that seemingly innocent holy boy, told you the truth. I saw him brought here myself, and I asked Lisa why he was here. It's simple. He attacked his parents with a knife while they were asleep. Yes, he does have his girl. But that's not the only thing on his list of ailments. I'm not even gonna name it for you. See, look, he just blatantly lied to your face with such an innocent look that you couldn't even suspect him of anything. And yet, it's not a human being anymore. He may even have been born an animal. And there was never anything human about him, though even an animal would not attack its parents, especially when they are asleep. The system works. Yes, it may seem at first glance that these people are being treated inhumanly. Remind me, they're subhumans. Miranda didn't find the whole rant very convincing. Yes, she used to think that way about people with mental disabilities herself. But when she met them in person, her opinion had changed dramatically. No matter what they did, no matter what disorder they had, they're still people who just can't be treated like that. And most importantly, where it's happening in her country, in the epicenter of a bright and fair capitalist society. True, she wasn't sure if the sick would have been treated differently under a different system, but still, she had seen how they were treated under this system. She strongly disliked it. When they got to their floor, they were immediately summoned by the supervisor to talk to her. Grace, Didn't I tell you last time that you're not allowed to talk to the kids in the children's ward? She put her fists on her waist. You did, Lisa, and I took it all into consideration. I wanted to show Miranda how our system works, that it is fair and everyone gets what they deserve. But she didn't agree and started talking to the kids who were suspicious of her. I tried to stop her, but she was too stubborn and persistent, so I was unsuccessful. Unfortunately, I can't be held accountable for the actions of the people around me. And even more unfortunately, despite that, you have to answer for my actions and Miranda's actions. Well, I give you my word of honor that I took into account my past mistake, and with the children did not utter a word. Talking to them strictly was Miranda's initiative alone, and I had nothing to do with it, unless you consider it complicit that I took her to them. But again, I only did it out of the goodness of my heart. All right. Aha. I believe you. You may go, and you and I will talk separately, she said with the look of an eagle that has been hovering over its prey for hours, waiting for it to exhaust itself. The mud came out, and they were left alone. It was like God's judgment on a sinner who had been guilty of at least killing his neighbor. Why are you doing this? She said, rising from her chair. And valiantly, seating herself on one of the sofas, Miranda continued to stand. And then, because I can't do otherwise. Freedom is a major aspect of human life that cannot be taken away, no matter what a person does. So, according to you, we should let all maniacs and pedophiles out of prisons. Even in prison, one can remain a free man. Freedom is in the mind. And these children, you get into their heads when their thinking is not yet formed, and take away the very essence of this freedom, cut it off at the root. You rob them of any attempt to be free. That's right, because they're not human. They'd been stripped of everything human since they were born. They're the embodiment of everything animal that's human. They're a bundle of instincts and emotional reactions. They need to be isolated from society because they're a threat to society. Someone has to do it. And that's why I'm calling for this mission to be carried out on my shoulders. How can you say that? Don't you see the contradiction here? You yourselves have become the very people you're fighting against. You are not human. I've had enough. I'm not going to stand for it or have anything to do with it. You can complain all you want. I don't care. So instead of fighting the problem, you just kill it. Funny, she grinned caustically. And how are you different from the other pathetic fighters against the system? Unfortunately, after what you've done here, I can't just let you go. You have to fulfill your punishment. And what have I done, exactly? A tingling feeling of fear arose in her chest. You have broken the rules, and every offense is punished. And you can't practice anywhere else because we're the only psychiatric hospital in this town. So think about it. Do you want to ruin your studies and your red diploma because of your principles and beliefs? She was right. Miranda did care about her diploma and her studies. She didn't want to lose any of it because it was the only thing that mattered to her in this life, and just saying goodbye to her like that would be stupid. Yes? And moreover, if she gave it up, she wouldn't be able to open her private clinic and help the unfortunate patients. What was her dream? A difficult choice was in front of her, but she had to make it. There's no other way. What kind of punishment are you offering me? We have one patient, a particularly violent one, who lives in a private room. From now on, the remaining 3 months of your practice, what are you doing here? Keeping an eye on her. I'm assigning you all her duties. If you're unhappy with anything, you'll get a negative review. It's your own fault for what you're about to experience. Miranda didn't object because she knew it was pointless. The news that there was such a patient in the hospital had piqued her interest the first time she had heard it from the assistant. And now she was to meet her in person. She had to get to her duties now and dispense the pills. She made her way to the watch, where Grace pulled a small container from a drawer that contained all the medications she needed in signed tables. Taking the appropriate container, she was horrified. The strongest pharmacies, tranquilizers, and other antibiotics suppressing the action of the nervous system, sedating a person, making a vegetable out of him. She knew perfectly well the combinations of the necessary drugs to treat schizophrenia. But the kind of combination she saw before her, she had only read about in the summaries of psychiatrists of the early 20th century, because that was not the way the drugs had been compensated for since then, because it was comparable to a lobotomy. The person would lose the remnants of consciousness and be like a poorly constructed robot. Challenging the appropriateness of the therapy, she wasn't going to get anything out of it anyway, because she had no say. So she just went up to the women's ward and opened the door. Interesting detail. All the ward doors in the women's ward were locked, unlike the men's ward. And the door to the private ward was no exception. Opening it, she saw her shoes left at the threshold. She walked further and stepped on the soft but old and worn carpet and saw an empty toilet with a stall and a shower. Finally, she walked into the room itself, where a woman lying face down against the back of the couch came into her view. She was clearly awake, as her legs were shaking with a moderately severe tremor. Even the woman paid no attention to the new nurse at first. That the nurse was new, she realized by the sound of her footsteps, which was strikingly different. It was softer, neater, and more ingratiating. New, she heard a low and almost masculine, old man's hoarse voice. "Yes, I'm an intern here, and I've been assigned to take care of you. Turn around, please, and take your pills. What do you care, whether I take them or not?" Softly bellowed she. Her quiet voice was terrifying Miranda. "It's my job." Reluctantly, she said, "Leave it on the table. I'll drink it when you leave." "I'm afraid that's not possible. I have to watch you drink them." "I'll drink it. Where will I go?" "Leave it on the table," she said, as if to make a point. This was not at all the kind of encounter Miranda had envisioned when she walked into this room and saw the list of medications prescribed for the patient. She should at least look like someone with advanced autism or severe dementia, but certainly not talking so calmly and clearly, fully aware of her words and what was going on. Something was clearly wrong here. "Tell me, did the last nurse also not keep track of whether or not you were taking your medication?" "Yes, I was. I was taking that poison into myself." She still hasn't turned around, and the sound of her speech drifts into the back of the couch. "I'm afraid if you did take them, you wouldn't be talking to me so calmly." "Yeah, so you know what effect they're supposed to have. And you're offering them to me anyway." She grinned wryly. "It's not up to me. Unfortunately, I can't influence it. You know, it's only my first day here, and I've already seen such inhuman atrocities as I've read about in documents. From the concentration camps where the Nazis experimented on people. Poor children locked in a cage even when they are out walking, prevented from calling their parents at least once a month. How guys were beaten up for drawing my portrait with a pencil on paper because he could supposedly hurt himself or someone else with that pencil. So I'd hate to give you these pills, but I'm afraid I have no other choice. So I'm not the only crazy person here who realizes that this isn't the way it's supposed to be. Tell me, how do you know what these drugs do?" "I used to be a doctor. I used to go on expeditions with scientists where I had to monitor their physical and mental health. So I know very well what strong peace and tranquilizers are." "Then how did you manage to keep your sanity after that?" "Willpower and no magic." She laughed evilly, not at all like a woman. "Will you have to take these pills? Or will I be forced to call an orderly who will make you do it? And then how will you be any different from the people who locked up those kids or beat up that kid?" Nothing. Miranda was finally confused and lost the initiative and control in the dialogue. "So just leave the poison on the table and let me drink it myself, without your supervision." Miranda realized that she was walking on thin ice already on the very first day of her 3-month practice, and if she didn't stand her ground, that ice would break under the weight of her body, and she would choke on the water. Something had to be done, and the woman still hadn't even turned around to look at her. "All right, I'll make you a deal. You put the pills in your mouth so the camera can record it. You drink water, but you don't swallow the drugs, and then you spit them out in the bathroom. And I walk away with peace of mind. And if anything, I can say that you drank them in front of me, and the responsibility for that act will be on your shoulders. Deal? Okay, I'll do it. The woman turned around and sat down on the couch. Then Miranda was able to examine her face, lost in fallen eyes with a paradoxically hard gaze that moved slowly, lazily, moving from one object to another, as if realizing that there was nothing new it could see anyway. The woman couldn't have been more than 55, but her face looked it, covered with overflowing wrinkles that one could mistakenly give her anything. 70. Her gray hair was neatly tied back in a ponytail, and to Miranda's surprise, were quite healthy, which didn't match her general appearance. The expression on her face was so emotional that it was impossible to understand her feelings. Her mouth was barely open as she spoke, and she should have been muttering to herself. But for some unknown reason, the voice could be heard clearly. It became obvious to Miranda that this was a complex person, rich in life stories, but very strong and strong-willed. It was the kind of person who remained free even in prison, and this was the first time she had ever seen such a person in person. Are you so divided on me? As if you've seen a giraffe for the first time. Miranda couldn't hide her chuckle. But or Medusa as you like. I'm not good at Russian, much less metaphor. Okay, give me your meds. There were some shouts and noises from the lower men's compartment, and Miranda rushed to them. There were 3 guys standing there, all no more than 20. One of them looked like a normal, healthy man. Another was clearly autistic, as if he were not here, but somewhere far away in space. And the third? The third was like something that had come up from a lower dimension to the humans. What happened here? Miranda came and stood next to the orderly and Grace. That thing won't let me sleep, shouted the one who looked the most normal of the trio, pointing at the devil's son. And I'm trying to sleep, and he's standing over me. I tell him to back off, and he keeps standing over me, like he's breathing in my ear. And before that, I was on my way to the bathroom. He beat me to it on purpose, but I thought, okay, I waited for him to come out. He's done all his business. He comes out and he's so polite. He tells me to come in. I thought, isn't he that bad? But where to? I go into the bathroom, and there's a pile of his feces, and the whole cabin stinks. But what's wrong with that? He protested. And when we had tea in the dining room, said the one who was high in space. He stood over our table, and he was leaving. It was the first time I'd ever seen such a thing, and I wanted to. Sam asked him to leave, and he sat in a nearby chair and just listened to our conversation. I honestly don't know what it is. And we had to leave. Here, help us out, please. He was so clearly shocked that it even showed on his always cold face. Well, what do you say? I turned to the culprit. Why are they cursing at me? Discussing me when I'm sitting right next to them. And they do it in such a way that I can hear it. I'm supposed to enjoy hearing it. I just wanted to spend time with them to get to know them. And they kick me out, pour negativity on me. What did I do to deserve this? For forgetting to flush the toilet? Do I deserve that? Miranda couldn't figure out if he was such a good actor that he played innocence so believably, like a real psychopath, or if he was really insane, and in his opinion, hadn't done anything special. She couldn't make the decision that was expected of her for some reason, so she decided to take him to the superintendent. To put the responsibility on her, she, in turn, did not listen to anything, and just sent the guy to the ward for the violent, for disorderly conduct. Miranda and Grace went home together. So you were at that crazy woman's house, giving her pills playfully? Grace asked. She's not that crazy, just an ordinary unhappy person. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary about her. Well, lucky you. You'll be babysitting her for the rest of your internship. I've only got a month left here, and you've been having fun, she said. But there she met the nurse who had cared for the woman before her. You're taking the pills you were prescribed. How are you feeling? Is there any change in your condition? Without much interest, she asked. The woman was silent and looked at the nurse with a glassy stare, not understanding her words at all. The next question seemed to trigger the right mechanism in her. Where were you born? I was born on Pushkin Street in a spacecraft. Famous doctor by profession, is a mountaineer. In the people simpleton at work you were called so in doctors, so to speak, necessary. And this is a whole system. After all, if we add up all the numbers in the people, we get 360 units. And this is already the average salary of a mountaineer in the doctor's court. And the accountant works on the other line, on the line of doctors. Because there will be misfortune. And the doctor of sciences will treat the climber. That on the Murmansk Peninsula will come to him to climb the ladder of doctors. And how to climb this ladder? Asked the nurse, according to the already obviously long-prepared methodologies. But it is necessary to take a scalpel to insert the Murmansk Peninsula. And what do you get? TV, Miranda, or what? Everything is clear, said the nurse, and handed the patient to Miranda. As soon as she came out, the woman immediately changed in her face, and her glassy gaze seemed to straighten, to breathe life into it. She sat down comfortably on the couch and crossed her arms over her chest. Joanna, embarrassed. Why did you say those names? Why do you care, child? A chill ran down Miranda's back. Why did you say those names? Answer me. She clenched her hands into fists. Well, said I said that tirade a long time ago. That fool to make her think that I have schizophrenia and that I am completely insane just came to mind. So I told you what? My name is Miranda and my mother's name was Joanna. I don't believe what you said. It's just something you said. You knew my mother from somewhere. Maybe I did. Why wouldn't I? Why are you talking to me? It's okay. He's just being the jerk to other people. Yeah, 'cause I heard you walking around and being outraged. And you're the first person I've ever heard here who didn't take this nonsense lying down and try to do something about it. So I thought you were your own man. Besides, who's gonna believe you that I'm normal? I've been here for 7 years pretending to be a camera, and they still haven't learned how to write sound. Tell me about your mom. Maybe I do know her. I don't remember much about her. I know she was a doctor, and she went to Alaska on a scientific expedition. And then my dad, and I got a letter saying she disappeared. A cold shiver ran through Miranda's body, a realization. Wait, what's your name? She couldn't believe it. Joanna. She realized it too. No way. Mom almost squealed in time, remembering they might be overheard. And Miranda. Daughter. Now she was a woman. And not just any woman, but a mother. By the look of her and her speech. The Jane of today was more like a sexless creature. Everything feminine in her had long since fallen asleep. But the long-awaited meeting with her daughter changed everything and awakened her dormant instincts. Her face changed at once. Her eyes filled with life, just like you. A lake that has been flooded with water. Her eyes no longer lazily glanced from object to object, but once again seemed to be searching for something new. Joanna seemed to come back to life in a flash, a couple of years younger. Mommy, how did you get here? Miranda, this is not the best time or place for this conversation. When is your night shift next week? Come to my place. Just let me know in advance that you're coming and we'll talk it over. Now get going before we're suspected of anything. Miranda returned to the watch. Grace said something to her, but she just answered like a programmed robot on an answering machine with prepared phrases. No, yeah, she doesn't know. Maybe she'll think about it. It was as if a curtain had fallen before her eyes. After the climax of the first half of the second act, the audience in her face was waiting for the continuation. They had been pulled out of the narrative at the most interesting point. Some of them even resented it. Is it possible to do such a thing? After all, everything had just finally moved to the action. Suddenly, this break is like a speed bump on a smooth road. Miranda, look out the window, you see. Suddenly, a man's voice came from nearby. She didn't even notice that the guy had gotten her name wrong. She just turned her head in his direction and listened. The guy speaking to her was a guy who had dementia, mildly pronounced, but still very noticeable. When you talk to someone with low-stage dementia, it's like talking to a 10-year-old kid. Yes, He understands what is being said to him. He responds, and it wouldn't be unusual if this 10-year-old kid hadn't settled into the body of a 20-year-old guy, which created a powerful dissonance. Everything he said could have been heard from a child who was just learning about the world and marveling at every little thing, but in no way from an adult. Even his gaze was Miranda. "You and see," he repeated. That consciousness was returning to her. "You see the construction site outside the window there. You see the tower crane there, so yellow, so beautiful. It makes you want to climb on it. Look how it moves. Left, right, and now left again. And now it's stopped, and it's lifting something. But that's just magic. How can he just pick something up with his big hook like that? Magic. I'm serious. I'd love to climb up on the tip of his nose and see what the ground looks like from above. Maybe even go skydiving. Wouldn't that be cool? I've never wanted to do that." "What, Rick? What are you talking about?" As if in her sleep, she tried to catch the gist of the conversation. "You're not listening to me at all." He was indignant. He pouted and stomped his feet. "I'll go to the headmistress, Lisa. I'll tell her all about you. You'll know how not to listen to me. She loves me, and she'll help me." "Doesn't she love you?" "That's what she told me. She doesn't love anybody here, but me, of course." "Rick, why are you sitting here again?" She's finally regained her senses. "Who says I'm sitting here? I'm taking a well-deserved vacation at the sanitarium. I'm being cared for, fed, entertained. It's true that I'm lying here with a psycho, but it's nothing like that. You don't think you're crazy? Why should I? I'm healthier than a bull. I'm the only normal one here. I look at all these fools who take pills. I feel sorry for them. I feel sorry for everyone here. Such miserable people." "You didn't answer. Why did they put you in that sanatorium?" "Oh, it's my crazy mom. I come home after tending to my flowers in the garden. She yells at me. Can you imagine? I don't do anything around the house. I don't go anywhere to work. She keeps yelling and yelling. So I thought I should shut her up with something. So I took a knife and threw it at her. It only gave her a little scratch. I swear, and she burned even more. And the way she looked at me. She took me here, said I needed treatment. And I told her she's the one who needs treatment. I'm healthier than her. All her antics. I could hardly contain a caustic laugh, and Miranda sank back into her thoughts. She woke up from this tragic dream only on the day she was on watch. That momentous day when she would learn the whole truth about her mother's disappearance. All the questions that had plagued her for so many years would finally find their answers. The light of truth would shine on the shadow of ignorance and obscurity. After working her day's work, she escorted a flight of most of the nurses, orderlies, and supervisor home, and stayed on watch to keep the ward in order. When she was satisfied that everyone was asleep, she went to Jonah's room. She had warned her the night before so she wouldn't fall asleep. She turned off the lights in the whole ward instead of the hallway lamp, supposedly having mixed up the switches. The cameras were not working. And she, calmly, without fear of being compromised, heavily opened the door to her mother's room for the fiddler. Jonah was sitting on the couch, staring into the non-working television. Miranda turned on the flashlight on her phone and put it between them. Joan looked worried. Her ever-present tremor in her legs was even worse than usual, and her gaze quickly ran from one detail of Miranda's appearance to another. Mom, honey, tell me, why are you locked up in solitary confinement away from everyone and given such heavy medication? When I got tired of the constant discussion of my person and the laughter behind my back from my hardy roommates, I decided to keep them awake. And when the orderlies came, I attacked them so that I would be considered violent and transferred to the ward for the violent. I thought it would be calmer there. I was wrong. I behaved calmly there, so they transferred me back here, and I repeated all the previous actions. And not being able to control me, they transferred me back to the violent ones. And then they brought me back again. When they were desperate, I forced them, for their own peace of mind, to move me to this separate ward where I would live in isolation from everyone else and not bother anyone. Why did they laugh at you? What did you do? What could you have done? How dare they laugh at you? Why couldn't you do anything against them? Stop them. Calm down, girl. Calm down. I couldn't fight back because this is a mental institution. It's dangerous to fight with a psycho, especially when you're in your right mind. They laughed at me for my stories, for telling the truth. People don't like to be told the truth, especially the uncomfortable truth. Although, to be honest, I thought the things I was saying would fall on their ears, since they correlate with the thoughts of psychos. But I was wrong. All too often, I was wrong. Mom, don't talk in riddles. What things? What inconvenient truth? Miranda was beginning to lose her patience. Forgive me, Miranda. Please forgive me for abandoning you, little one. It was unacceptable, but I had no other choice. Tell me everything from the beginning. From the moment you left on this expedition. Please tell me. I must know. I must know everything. I went on another watch. The only difference was that it was not somewhere in Siberia, but in Alaska. I had to monitor the condition of the expedition members, and I did it. Everything was fine, but suddenly it was person after person. People started disappearing. In front of my eyes, a man talking to some voice that I heard. Only he went without a jacket in a heavy snowstorm and disappeared behind a shroud of snow. Following that voice, it was talking to him, saying something about punishment and karma for all his deeds, and as if accepting his death. The blizzard was so strong that you couldn't see anything farther than an outstretched arm. I immediately ran after him, but of course it was to no avail. His body was never found. The morale of the remaining 10 expeditioners began to drop. Everyone was worrying, arguing with each other, blaming, throwing, fighting. There was the first death due to the fault of the expedition members. They got drunk. 2 drunken healthy men conflicted with the accumulated anxiety, but one of them had a clear outcome. One night I went out to go to the toilet. The fire was still burning, and suddenly, it was something inexplicable, some kind of black cloud. It moved on our camp and swallowed it into itself. I tried to do something about it, tried to set it on fire, threw snow on it, doused it with gasoline, but all was fair. There was no hope. My tent was the only thing left untouched. There was nothing left for me to do but go to sleep so I could leave in the morning. Surprisingly, I fell asleep well. But the dream I had is this. You'll think I'm crazy, but I have to tell you. There was an old man talking to me. If it wasn't an old man, it was an old woman, or was it a young man? I don't know. I only remember that he had black spots instead of eyes. We were sitting in a completely white room with a window that seemed to hang in the air, and through it we could see our camp. I asked the old man what had happened to all my companions. Why had they suffered such a fate? To which he replied, "It's a punishment for sins." One had sexual fantasies about molesting children. Another had secret desires, murder. A third cheated on his wife when he had a sick daughter, ruining her life. When the truth came out, a fourth was cheating people out of grants, laundering money from his high school friend who was a member of a criminal gang. The others had a similar story. But why wasn't I taken with them? Because I was clean, going on shifts away from home to feed my family, to raise you, my little girl. That's why they didn't hurt me and I survived. In the morning, I found the only snowmobile right in front of my tent left for the nearest settlement, from where I called for help. When help arrived, I told everything in great detail how it was. But to me, of course, what could I even count on? They didn't believe me. This case was taken up by the special services, who could not explain what happened and pinned all the murders on me, because as a child I was seen by a psychiatrist, so I'm crazy. That's crazy. Nonsense. Galochka, honey, I can see the disbelief in your eyes, but don't think. No, don't think that your mom went crazy and killed them all. No, no way. Do I look like the kind of person who would kill? Come here, give me a hug. You don't want to. Okay, I'm sorry. You're an idiot. All right, well, I'll continue. I was sent straight to prison, to a mental institution, where I've been until today. A long 12 years. I didn't talk to anyone. I pretended to be insane. I didn't take pills. But not too long ago, I decided to open up to a roommate who had schizophrenia. But for some reason I thought we were close. I told them all this. They started laughing, telling me I was crazy. Well, you can imagine me. I'm crazy. It's unthinkable, unthinkable. And then you know the rest. And that's how I ended up in this ward. Suddenly, there was a creaking sound in the hallway just outside the door. Miranda ran out to see who was there, but she didn't see anyone. Needed to leave before she got caught. She was taking too much risk, and that risk wasn't worth it. Without saying goodbye, John, she just walked out and down back to her watch, having previously walked around all wards. Miranda saw that Rick was awake and made him fall asleep, even though he resisted. Naughty child. All in a chair, she didn't notice as he lowered himself onto her eyelids and plunged her into serenity. Back at the hospital a day later, Miranda approached Lisa to find out more about the story. When she entered her office, she found the supervisor at work, but she graciously agreed to talk to her. Lisa once again put on a mask of kindness, concern, and a certain lightheartedness. "Hello, Miranda. What can I do for you?" She smiled slyly, but Miranda was too preoccupied with herself to pay attention. "This is a patient in a private room. She appears to be schizophrenic." Schizophrenia wasn't the only thing on this poor woman's mind. I've been listening to what she's saying, and you know, there's a certain consistency to it. She's always talking about some expedition, scientists, some dark entities. Can you tell me her background? Briefly. That's odd. I've never heard her talk about anything like that. Usually she's just a bunch of ramblings that seem to make sense. Well, yes, indeed, she was on the expedition. She was the doctor in charge of the physical and mental condition of the expedition members. They went to Alaska to explore geology or something. But they set up camp right under a poisonous gas deposit that caused extreme hallucinations. Eventually, some members just disappeared and she went crazy and killed everyone who was there at the behest of God's voice. Sad story, but it couldn't be helped. They put her in the hospital, and she's been laid up here now. 12 years, and it's only gotten worse. She used to be able to talk normally. Miranda couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her mom's a crazy killer. Her mom. There's something Lisa's not telling us. Or is she? Thank you. That explains a lot. I won't bother you again. She was about to leave when suddenly... Wait. Do I really have anything else to tell you? Yes. Nothing Alice didn't suspect. Why did you lie to me? She threw herself in her chair. I didn't lie to you. Fear tugged at her. Why didn't you tell me she could normally say anything she'd been pretending all along? Because it's not true. She can't talk normally. She can't. And my source says he heard you talking to her in person the night before last. Turns out she's your mom. Well, that's a twist. I thought we were in this together, Miranda, and you treat me like this. That's not nice. I'm gonna have to penalize you because you blew every chance you got. What did I give you? I'm sorry. She's guilty. She's got her head down. If she really believed those fairy tales. Black cloud of voices. Old man in the white room. Yes, I realize schizophrenics are very smooth. They say that then you can't keep track of it. You'll believe them yourself, and you'll be no different from them. But really, are you serious? Poor woman did not breathe gas, broke the vision, and did terrible things. Of course, the psyche can't take it. Displace the events and replace them with others, as in the case of the black cloud. I thought you were a bright girl, that you could see through emotions. What's going to happen now? Molubna looked Miranda over. That is no longer your concern. You are henceforth suspended from any obligations at this hospital until further discretion. I can't say it's been a pleasure doing business with you. You can go. She delved further into her paperwork. Walking down the corridor, Miranda took one last look at the post-changing patients around the ward. They weren't allowed to draw. There were no phones. The TV was only turned on in the evening books. They weren't allowed to sneak in. And the few that were in the ward were of such paltry varieties that even in such conditions, no one was going to read them. All that was left was to just walk back and forth down the corridor. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Once a day, the nurses allowed those who wanted to clean the corridors to do so in exchange for 2 cigarettes. But it's strictly forbidden to smoke while taking such medication, Miranda thought. But no one here cared about that. Everyone smoked in the toilets, and all the employees didn't care. They even encouraged it. The toilets here were never closed so that the patients in there could not harm themselves. The protozoa and the inhabitants of the air were not there either, from which there was an unbearable stench throughout the ward, the epicenter of which were the toilet stalls, and it was goodbye to it all once and for all. What would happen to her mother, Joanna? She'd assumed the worst, but she couldn't be 100% sure. She couldn't be 100% sure of any of them. How do you feel about what she told her? Believe it, disbelieve it. Can you believe it? Can you not believe what your own mother says? And she had not even had time to say goodbye to her. For when Miranda now went into her room, Joanna and all her things were not there. Apparently, she'd been moved to another, stricter ward for the violent. And it was her own fault, going to talk to her. But how could she not after all these years apart? In any case, there is only what there is, which is nothing. There is nothing. No mom, no practices, no career, nothing. And all out of a simple accident of unfortunate coincidence. Miranda gathered her things, changed her clothes, and went home, where her father was already waiting for her, who had come to visit her since Miranda lived in the dormitory and hadn't seen him for a long time. He looked as usual, serene and aloof, like a piece of dough or plasticine that could be molded any way you wanted, given the right shape. For today, Miranda was in no mood to betray her father's line of behavior. So, as aloof and unconcerned as he was, he spoke to him. "How are you doing in practice?" he asked, when the roommates left the room, leaving her alone. "I got kicked out," she said, adjusting her textbooks on the table. "How?" he exclaimed, either surprise or not his emotional reaction. It was always difficult to understand since it was as if his face was behind dirty glass. "I didn't agree with the rules. The hospital opposed it. And we're all that sort of thing. You know, I think I'll tell you the truth, though. I saw my mom in there. She's been in there for over a decade. Did you know that?" His face changed a lot. He turned a little pale, and his eyes started to run around the room nervously. He looked like an anxious animal afraid of being caught by a wolf. "Miranda, dear, look, you knew about this." She looked at him coldly, looked him in the eye. He sighed heavily and sat down on her bed. Miranda towered like a mountain, standing in front of him. "Yes, I knew about it, but you understand me. How could I tell my own daughter that her beloved mother was lying in a mental dispensary? How could I? It would have been even more traumatic for you if you'd just thought she was missing. That way you'd have some hope that she was still alive. And then you'd just know that your mom went crazy. She's never coming back. What makes you think she's gone crazy? She probably told you the same story about the black clouds and the voices. I hope you realize that it's utter nonsense, and she just couldn't breathe the gases that destroyed her brain. I read about a gas deposit in Alaska, and there's no information. I didn't find anything about poisonous gas. It looks more like the dumbass operatives couldn't find an explanation for the unexplained, so they made up some gas and put the only surviving witness in a mental institution to discredit him and thus silence the truth. You know, a wise man once said that if you lock a perfectly healthy person in one room with a crazy person, the crazy person will not become healthy, but the healthy person would go crazy. Mental illness is an unstoppable force that crushes weak barriers in its path. Unfortunately, your psyche was that weakest barrier, and it was crushed. Your mother's frustrations, but I ask you not to give in to her provocations, and be strong. You should forget about her. You can't visit her anyway. I only got to visit her once when she went in there. And it was a sad experience, a very sore and sad experience. I never saw her again, and I wouldn't advise you to. I've already gotten over her loss. Now you need to get over it. You're crazy yourself. How could you forget your own wife, and then ask your daughter to forget her own mother? I never want to see you again. Get out of my sight. Miranda whispered pitifully. Go away. She sobbed. There was nothing left for him to do. How to put up with Lifshitz again. Everything was on him. Give up and walk away defeated. Father was such an empty entity to Miranda that she even forgot his name sometimes. Joe, Jack John. She usually forgot his name when she became disillusioned with him. And now she'd forgotten it again. What was his name? Suddenly, the tears rolled from her eyes, streaming down her cheeks and falling onto her sneakers in the carpet, and the whole world collapsed before her eyes like a massive natural disaster, like an earthquake. Everything around her shook and seemed so shaky and fragile, like a crystal slipper that would shatter at the slightest pressure. Miranda was afraid to move because it seemed to her that this was the only way she could keep the balance of the world. Only in this way could she save it from imminent destruction. Dreadful thoughts like poison flooded her body, reaching her brain, beginning to destroy it from the inside out. Revenge. She was afraid to do anything about it. She was the only one who had found a soul close to her in life, the soul she had been searching for so long, the one she had lost to her childhood wounds. Revenge. There was no telling what would happen to her now. Her mom was taken from her without giving her the slightest opportunity to even enjoy her presence in her life. Revenge. She has to do something. Something to get back to the hospital somehow, to at least look at her from around the corner one more time. A few months passed. The early spring bright sun dazzled her eyes. There were no clouds in the sky. Hard work and hard work. Miranda managed to secure a second internship opportunity at the hospital. This time she was placed in the psychoethics ward, where she spent a few weeks looking for an opportunity to go to the hard ward and see her mom. This opportunity came to her when a patient from the severe ward was transferred to her ward. It was a severely depressed girl who had made a failed suicide attempt. According to the rules, all suicides were sent to the heavy ward first. There they were monitored. And if they were calm and complied with the rules, they were transferred to the psychoethical ward, where they were already receiving treatment. It was not particularly beautiful, but also far from scary girl. They had an ordinary appearance, bright red hair. She was slightly full of absorbent cotton and low, didn't socialize with anyone. She sat in her room all day and night, reading books, and only occasionally in the evening, she would get out to the restroom to change her reading location and somehow unwind. Psychosis about a boy, which occupied one large floor. There were both men and women. Since she was the only girl in the ward, everyone wanted to meet her, but guys weren't allowed to enter the women's floor. The only place they could meet was the dining hall. She had a strict diet and didn't eat the food in the canteen, only what her family brought her. Watching her for a couple days, Miranda finally pulled herself together and decided to approach her and talk to her. Starting with kind and open smiles, disposition and understanding, she soon settled down. Diana. That was the patient's name for herself, and struck up a dialogue. Why did you try to kill yourself? She asked when she sensed her interlocutor's disposition. I was dumped by a guy who was the light of my life, and I thought that life without him had no meaning. Couldn't I have gotten his attention in a safer way? Miranda tried to smile kindly. What makes you think I wanted his attention? I was getting sick without him. He said he'd never come back to me. So I had no other choice. It's very sad. They were quiet for a while. How was it for you in the heavy ward? You know, it was actually better than here. Nobody touched me. The ward manager made careful rounds every day and asked me how I was feeling. Changed medication adjustments. The crazies, as they are called, turned out to be friendly people. Yes, some were bowing, but at least there was no intrusiveness. Like here. And all dialogue was natural, in which both sides were interested. They knew how to listen there. The only downside, is that there's not much to do there. But if it wasn't for that, I'd love to stay there. I also worked there a couple months ago. I was also interning there, and there was a patient there. I was wondering if you knew her. She had a low, gruff voice, healthy gray hair. She looked more like a man than a woman. She was about 50 years old. She was rambunctious, and they put her in a private room, the one that was chargeable. I don't know how you wouldn't happen to see one there now. And this is the one that had the lobotomy. Miranda's legs gave out. She collapsed to the floor. Unfathomable. Unacceptable. Unavoidable. There's nothing wrong with you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to shock you with the news. Were you and her close? I'm sorry. I don't have to go. A thick morning fog descended on her mind. Many seemed to be mired in a web that pulled her back, preventing her from walking normally. At any moment, she could have fallen, and the web would have dragged her back into the abyss. But she resisted and barely made it to her post. The chair was like a swamp mire that sucked anyone who dared to step on it into itself. Her ears were as if stuffed with absorbent cotton, from which only echoes of the surrounding sounds reached her consciousness. And you're hard of hearing ear, she thought. Hey, hello. The screams grew louder and louder. Suddenly, the fog began to clear, and she saw Rick in front of her, looking at her haughtily and gloatingly with his childish eyes. What are you doing here? The superintendent kicked you out, didn't she? He smiled like a hurt child who had finally gotten his revenge. Miranda didn't answer, turning away and pretending he wasn't here. I told you you wouldn't listen to me. You're going to laugh, make fun of me, then I'll just go and complain to the superintendent. I told you I did. It's your fault your mommy got that thing done. Whatever. Anyway, I told you. You little bastard. How dare you? She screamed, standing up in front of him and starting to spit in his face. Easy, easy, easy. Miranda, a nurse came running up and quickly broke them up. This incident was decided to be put down and quickly quieted down so that no unnecessary noise would be raised. Miranda was given her first and last warning, and she vowed that it would not happen again. It had already decided how to proceed. But first she needs to see her mother, to see for the last time her eyes, and what was done to her. She must see, she must know, she must look at all things squarely. Once she got to the right floor of the other building, Miranda knocked on the door. For a while, no one opened it for her. But soon the door opened slightly and a nurse's head peeked out, asking what was going on. Miranda said that she had a private conversation with the superintendent, but they wouldn't just let her in because there was no warning about it. And to her great regret, she can't let a stranger in, even if he works here just in another building. Something had to be done, but nothing came to mind. There was nothing to do. She had to retreat. When she got back to her building, she went to the office of the head of the psychoromantic department to ask for his help. He was a young man of about 35 with a short haircut of light, full absorbent cotton, and with pleasant facial features. His voice was low velvety like an announcer's, and Miranda had liked him even the first time they met. His office was tidied, systematized, and neat, with no room for an assistant. There were also paintings hanging. Behind him hung a metaphysical portrait that appeared to have been painted by the same man who had done the portrait for Lisa. But this time, the portrait turned out to be round from the wife's eyes, and without the slightest sharp angle, pleasant to the eye, and extremely aesthetically pleasing, as a small number of patterns repeated at least twice created a complete and finished composition with a pronounced meaning, which could be interpreted one way or another. Miranda sat down on the sofa in front of her and told her everything that was troubling her soul. She told about her mother, about her father, about being kicked out, about the head of the other department, and about the mentally retarded Rick, which had ruined her loved one. Please, Liam, help me. Give me the chance to see my mom one last time. The only time I want to see her face and what was done to her. It's very important to me. I don't know what I can do to you for that, but I am willing to do anything if you would just make arrangements with her. Dear heartfelt Liam, your request is logical and justified. The only thing is, it violates the hospital's rules about visiting patients in the critically ill ward. But Miranda's eyes sparkled, but I think I can think of something, because the case is extraordinary. And you deserve us to step into your shoes. We're not monsters after all. One visit's not gonna hurt the patient. Thank you very, very much. I ran out of the office with joy. She was working on an emotional high with a light hand. All the cases were nothing compared to the power she now possessed. Not even Rick had caused her such rejection, but she still hadn't forgotten what he had done. Couldn't forgive him, despite everything. But she was well aware of her global goal and the plans she'd come up with. A few days later, Miranda called Liam and informed her that she was allowed to meet her mother. Lisa protested strongly, but he managed to negotiate with the hospital authorities who pressed her. After getting to the right floor, she knocked on the door. She was opened by the same nurse who hadn't let her in a couple days ago. Miranda gave her a leering look and silently walked to the right room. The metal door opened with a creak. She saw the familiar interior of the place where everything had happened. The prison where her mother had been imprisoned. But where is she herself? There she was, sitting on the couch with her eyes closed. Mom. Tanya answered only a murderous silence came to her hearing. In answer to her question, Miranda walked over and took her hand. The muscles were completely unstiffened. She could be manipulated like a puppet. Dent. A dent in the back of her head. God. No, what have they done? How could they? Mommy, talk to me. Please, say something. Don't be silent, she begged. I won't. Joanna's eyes closed, and she seemed to fall asleep for a moment. Then she woke up abruptly and started making incoherent noises. What have they done to you? How can this be tolerated in this country? How? Nothing. It's okay. Mommy, I'll let them go. They'll answer for what they did. They'll answer for everything. Just don't worry. When the fire starts, everything will be fine. I'll always be with you, just like you are with me. We'll always be together. Just don't worry. Tears of despair, hopelessness mixed with determination, willpower, and a desire for bloody, heartless, irrational desire for revenge. She knows what she has to do. Back at her dorm, she pulled out her stash with all the savings she'd made. There were a few 1,000s. She will have enough to make it worth it. Miranda painfully went to the gas station and bought a few dozen liters of gasoline and a lighter. How could this be smuggled into the hospital? Easy. After waiting for the day of her shift, she left the car, in the trunk of which all this gasoline was stored at the gate. At night, the nurses would lock the door, but she had the key, so waited until everyone was tired. She opened the door and stepped outside. The guard had long since fallen asleep in the booth. All she had to do was not to wake him. Hojali tried to open the door. No luck. It was locked. The guard must have the key somewhere. With quiet steps, she crept to his booth, opened the door, and saw the keys hanging on a nail. This is it. Just don't wake him up. Do it quietly, without stepping on the chip clip. She reached for the keys from the threshold, but accidentally stumbled back. A sharp sound, boards creaking, echoed throughout the booth. What? Who's there? The guard jumped up, but Miranda had time to hide behind the wall. He waited until he was asleep again. She reached for the keys again, and this time it was successful. Finding the right key, she locked the guard in his own booth and opened the gate. Not 10 minutes later, she dragged all the canisters to the entrance of the main building. Gasoline poured out onto. It dripped down the stairs, down the walls, and even sometimes from the ceiling. Gasoline was from everywhere. Every meter was at least somewhat flooded with gasoline. She poured gasoline on the grass, and on the street, too, to make that one ignite, too, making it difficult to get out of the main entrance. The lighter caught fire. A small flame developed in the wind. That small flame could do great destruction, and it did. The lighter fell to the ground. The gasoline immediately began to ignite in a chain wave. In a moment, the whole building was ablaze. The heating inside hadn't been turned off yet, so everything was burning perfectly. It didn't end there. Ran to the shed where the gardeners left their tools. She easily retrieved a metal rake from there. Once she got to the children's ward, she broke the bars on the window with difficulty and great effort, starting to scream and bang the ships on the iron. It woke up generally everyone inside, but the nurses and some of the children ran away at the noise. "Run away from here! Run away from here! The gates are open. Can you run?" Screaming at the top of her voice, she, trying to give them hope. The educated children started climbing out of the windows. Some ran to wake their comrades. The nurses tried to restrain them, but the stronger ones just pushed them away, and the old women fell to the floor. When they realized the hopelessness of their attempts, every child found themselves outside and, banding together, ran after Miranda toward the exit. The main building was already all ablaze. Crowds of employees and patients found themselves outside. Some climbed onto the roof. Some put bars on the windows and jumped from the second and third floors, breaking their legs. Hojuli ran headlong and shouted to everyone that the exit was free. The crowds immediately rushed to the small gate, pushing each other. There was a crush, but no one was hurt. The guard tried unsuccessfully to break down the door. Then he grabbed a chair and broke the window, jumping out and trying to stop everyone. A wave of people just swept him out of the way. It was too late to do anything. You should have thought about safety earlier. Miranda didn't see her mother in the crowd and thought she could have accomplished her task. Her mom should have been suffocated by the smoke. That would be better for her, for Miranda thought death was better than such a miserable, insignificant life. John had lost the most important thing in her life, inner freedom. It was unlikely she would want to live with her own mind as a prisoner after such a thing. Or rather, what was left of it. Miranda didn't try to hide after committing her revenge. She simply went to her dormitory and fell into a peaceful, satisfied sleep. She was already taken to the station in the morning. 13 people died from the fire, and several dozen more had severe injuries. She was sentenced to the death penalty, which had not yet been abolished in their country at that time. The trial lasted several months, which was quick by the standards of the court. Committing a terrorist act and terrorist activity. That was her verdict. Joanna died in the fire from asphyxiation. Miranda's father contracted kidney disease from grief amidst severe stress and died soon after. Rick, who was one of the perpetrators of the disaster, he had only a few severe burns on his hands, which healed after a couple of months, leaving only white spots on his swarthy skin. He had no regrets or guilt because it was physically impossible for him. But the stress did not go unnoticed by him, destroying his brain and increasing his dementia. For the rest of his life, he sat in his apartment under the care of relatives and a caregiver. Just before he died, Miranda thought again about everything he had done. The senselessness and stupidity of the deed with bloody sores came out on the body of her consciousness. All the patients in the hospital were soon caught and put back in. The condition of many only worsened after such a tragedy. What she was trying to accomplish with her act of protest, she had ruined not only her life, but also the lives of so many people. Tears of bitterness flowed from her eyes. But it was too late for regret. The depravity had only hit her body, a hellish pain that traveled from head to toe at the speed of light. Death.